Chapter 570. Zhen Yangzi was a martial Dao grandmaster of the older generation, yet he was injured by a junior like Li Feilian. This was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Although Zhen Yangzi was injured because he was chasing Lin Yi with all his might and did not even have his weapon with him, an injury was an injury. There was no good excuse. When Chu Xiu saw the scene of Zhen Yangzi being injured from behind, his eyes immediately revealed a cold glint. The pure Yang Dao sword was still entangled with Chu Xiu, but in the next moment, the demonic aura around Chu Xiu had already erupted to the extreme, fusing with killing intent and evil spirit. He executed the heaven-extinguishing earth obliterating selfless killing fist. As the fist landed, an unparalleled fist aura blasted on the pure Yang Dao sword, causing the demon-suppressing Dao pattern on it to tremble and then shatter. A weapon without a master was just an inanimate object. Zhen Yangzi was probably thinking too much if he wanted to rely on an inanimate object to hold him back. Previously, Chu Xiu did not make a move because he wanted to preserve his last bit of strength and wait for an opportunity. Now, the opportunity had come. After defeating the pure Yang Dao sword, Chu Xiu's hand was already on the hatred saber as he rushed towards Zhen Yangzi. Seeing that Lin Yi still dared to have any ideas on him, Zhen Yangzi could not help but be enraged. Did the two juniors, Li Feilian and Lin Yi, really think that he was a pushover? Powerful and majestic pure yang energy erupted from Zhen Yangzi's body. Even though his internal organs and 5 qis had been injured, the power that erupted in that instant was still shocking to others. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu did not care about Zhen Yangzi's actions at all. He did not attack first, but instead transformed nearly half of his mental strength into the soul-annihilating arrow and shot it with his mind, heading straight for Zhen Yangzi. The soul-annihilating arrow was an incomparably overbearing essence-spirit secret technique that followed the path of extreme lethality. It was incomparably ferocious, and there was no other way but to resist it. It was very risky to use the soul-destroying arrow before using the 7 demon swords, but for Chu Xiu, he would only do so if he was at least 60% confident. The invisible arrow brought with it a majestic pressure as it headed straight for Zhen Yangzi's mind. Not long ago, Chu Xiu had used this soul-extinguishing arrow to injure Su Xing's spirit. Against Zhen Yangzi, this soul-extinguishing arrow was just as domineering. Although Zhen Yangzi's mental energy wasn't weak, his pure yang energy was clearly unable to completely negate the power of the soul-extinguishing arrow. Coupled with the fact that he had been heavily injured by Li Feilian earlier, when the soul-extinguishing arrow shot towards him, even though Zhen Yangzi had used all his strength to block it, his mental energy was still injured by the soul-extinguishing arrow, causing Zhen Yangzi to let out a muffled groan, pain and madness appearing in his eyes. The martial artists who were watching from the side were completely stunned. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu and Li Feilian would actually put Zhen Yangzi in such a difficult position? Although the two of them didn't join hands, their attacks came one after another, not giving Zhen Yangzi any room to breathe. Initially, Taoist Guang Ning didn't intend to interfere in this matter. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming also didn't suggest for him to interfere. However, now that Taoist Guang Ning noticed that something was amiss, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Although he didn't have much of a relationship with Zhen Yangzi, they were both from the 3 Dao sects. Taoist Guang Ning couldn't just watch Zhen Yangzi die here. However, before Taoist Guang Ning could make a move, Chu Xiu had already made his move. While Zhen Yangzi's mental energy was heavily injured, Chu Xiu made his move. The saber was unsheathed, filled with hatred. Hate the heavens, hate the earth, hate the people, hate himself. When that saber slashed out, an extreme amount of negative energy exploded. Hatred was the easiest way to explode one's incomparable potential. It was also the easiest way to cause one to sink into madness. The 7 demon saber harmed others but also oneself. When the hatred saber was unsheathed, it triggered the hatred in Chu Xiu's heart. It was Zhen Yangzi's hatred and everyone else's hatred. The moment the hatred saber was unsheathed, the hearts of the martial artists who saw the hatred saber were already affected. Their eyes were slightly red as they panted heavily. In the pugilistic world, killing and hatred were unavoidable. As long as one had hatred in his heart, he would be affected by the hatred saber. The hatred saber slashed out. A black saber radiance tore through the sky. The golden pure yang astral qi around Jianghu was completely stained black. Even his eyes were gradually losing their luster, leaving behind only a crazy amount of hatred. The strongest point of the seven demon saber wasn't its attack power, but its ability to trigger in extreme emotion. Although Jianghu was from a Taoist sect, he had hatred in his heart. A lot of hatred. He hated Li Failian for killing the genius disciple of his Chunyang Dao sect. He hated Chu Xiu for slaughtering the elites of his Chunyang Dao sect. He also hated himself for being incompetent and not being able to wipe out the evil spirits in the world. He hated even more that in his generation, the Chunyang Dao sect was gradually going downhill. They were unable to regain the glory of their ancestors and had shamed their ancestors. These were all obsessions. Coupled with the fact that he'd been heavily injured by Chu Xiu earlier, these deep-rooted obsessions instantly erupted, causing him to seem as if he'd gone mad. He'd lost all reason, and he didn't put up any defense as he welcomed Chu Xiu's hateful blade with all his might. The black saber radiance tore through everything. It tore apart the astral qi around Jianghu's body and left a huge, hideous wound on his chest. He was sent flying 1,000 feet away and fell to the ground like a rag doll. The power of the hatred saber. The more you hated, the more powerful the hatred saber would be. It could even be said that Jianghu was responsible for at least half of the power of the saber. Jianghu, who was lying on the ground, had the last glimmer of clarity in his eyes. However, Chu Xiu's saber had robbed him of all his vitality. In the end, Jianghu did not even have the chance to say a word before he lost all signs of life. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. It took him a great deal of willpower to put the hatred saber back into its sheath, suppressing the boundless hatred in his heart. In an instant, the surroundings were incomparably silent. Even the battle between Xiahou Zhen and Mr. Liu had slowed down, and everyone looked at Chu Xiu with astonished gazes. This Lin Yi actually killed Jianghu. Although part of the credit for Jianghu's death was due to Li Failian, Jianghu had died by Lin Yi's saber. There was no doubt that Lin Yi brought them the greatest shock. It was not rare for a oneness of heaven and man to kill a martial Dao master. There was Zhang Qingzhen and Chu Xiu. Even a few on the Longhu leaderboard, such as Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, and Ying Bailu, actually had the strength to kill ordinary martial Dao masters. However, there was a gap between martial Dao masters. Jianghu was famous in the underworld. Even among the older generation of martial artists, he was considered one of the best. However, he had died by Lin Yi's hands today. To be more precise, he had died by the hands of Lin Yi and Li Failian, two martial artists of the younger generation. This had shocked everyone present to the point that they were speechless. At that moment, everyone saw Li Failian slowly take out another 9 flying daggers from the secret space box and insert them into his belt. This caused everyone to be stunned. Did this mean that Li Failian had more than 10 daggers? Chu Xiu understood. Li Failian's flying daggers were really ordinary. They were not even treasured weapons. His strength did not lie in the flying daggers themselves, but in the person who used them. He only carried 10 daggers with him because with his current strength, he could only use 10 daggers. After that, even if he had 100 more flying daggers on him, they would be useless. After packing up, Li Failian turned around and left. No one present stopped him, nor did anyone say anything. However, it was only then that everyone seemed to realize that Li Failian was also a ruthless person. From the moment he appeared until now, he had only one goal: to kill Jianghu. He did not even say a single word. Now that Jianghu had been killed, he had left as well. It was as clean as it could get. Chu Xiu secretly shot a glance at Lu Fengxian. Then, he turned around and left the blissful demon palace. Although Chu Xiu had killed Jianghu, he had expended a lot of his energy. He was almost at the end of his rope, especially his mental strength. Because he had used the soul-extinguishing arrow and the hatred blade, he had used up all his mental strength. Ever since he entered the Xiaofan sky, Chu Xiu had used his mental strength in too many places. He had used up his mental strength many times. Most of the time, Chu Xiu was recovering his mental strength. Now, Chu Xiu's condition was not good. Therefore, even though he knew that there were still many treasures in the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not have the time to search for them. He could only remind Lu Fengxian to take action now and seize the initiative. Taoist Guang Ning was considered a kind person. However, he had killed Jianghu, who was also from the three great Dao sects. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were not easy to deal with. If Chu Xiu continued to stay here and fight with them, they would not hold back. Indeed, after Chu Xiu left, Taoist Guang Ning was still holding the horsetail whisk and Dao sword in his hands. He subconsciously wanted to stop him. However, in the end, he sighed and gave up. Jianghu was already dead. What was the use of stopping him now? Actually, Taoist Guang Ning was prepared to help. However, who would have thought that Lin Ye's attack was too fast? He killed Jianghu with a single slash, not giving him a chance to help at all. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming were happy to see this. Lin Yi escaped with heavy injuries. Of the two martial Dao grandmasters who came in, one was dead, and the other was still fighting with Mr. Lu. No matter how they looked at it, they would not be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, there was a commotion below. It turned out that Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng had already started attacking the armory's formation, snatching the cultivation methods and treasures within. Yu Qifeng and Huangfu Weiming immediately snorted coldly. This group of juniors was quite fast. However, most of the items in the blissful demon palace still belonged to them, the martial Dao grandmasters. With that thought in mind, Yu Qifeng and the other two also entered the fray. The entire blissful demon palace instantly became a mess. Mr. Lu and Xiahou Zhen stopped at the same time. Mr. Lu sneered at Xiahou Zhen. "Patriarch Xiahou, I wonder if you still think that I'm qualified to fight with you?" Chapter 571. Xiahou Zhen's expression was gloomy. He had such a good opportunity today, but he failed to avenge his son's death. He had a feeling that it would be even more difficult for him to take revenge in the future. He had never expected that Jianghu would die. That Lin Yi had actually killed Jianghu. Regardless of whether Li Failian had interfered or not, and regardless of the situation at the time, anyone who could kill a martial Dao master at the unity of heaven and man realm was not simple. Moreover, Lin Yi was an outstanding figure cultivated by the Yinma clan, so he would definitely be protected by the Yinma clan to a certain extent, just like now. Once Lin Yi stepped into the martial Dao master realm, even Xiahou Zhen was not confident that he could defeat him. Xiahou Zhen looked at Mr. Lu coldly and snorted, then turned around and left. Another troublesome figure had appeared in the phaseless demon sect. Previously, this Mr. Lu was not eye-catching in the phaseless demon sect, but now that he had stepped into the martial Dao master realm, the power he displayed was shocking. He was actually able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Xiahou Zhen, who had stepped into the martial Dao master realm for more than 10 years. There were many crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the demonic path, and it was definitely not as simple as it seemed to the outside world. After Xiahou Zhen left, Mr. Lu sneered in disdain. He also entered the blissful Devil Palace's palaces and began to search for some treasures. Mr. Lu was actually very low-key before, but after stepping into the martial Dao master realm, he wanted to find someone to test his strength on. Previously, when Chu Xiu was being hunted, he wanted to rescue Chu Xiu and fight Nie Renlong at the same time. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would come back himself? In a dense forest over 10 miles east of the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu did not go far. Instead, he left a unique mark of the Yinma clan outside and temporarily recovered his strength. After half a day, Mr. Lu appeared here. What was even more strange was that Li Failian was following behind him. Mr. Lu said to Li Failian, "This is the most outstanding young talent of the Yinma clan, Lin Yi. You guys were fighting side by side just now, so you should be very familiar with each other." Li Failian cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said simply, "Brother Chu." Li Failian didn't seem to be good with words. He spoke very little, to the point where he treated his words like gold. Chu Xiu also cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said, "Brother Li's flying dagger is very strong. In fact, it's the strongest flying dagger I've ever seen." If there's a chance in the future, I hope to exchange pointers with Brother Li. Li Faolian nodded and said, "You flatter me." Seeing Li Faolian's appearance, Chu Xiu knew that it would be very difficult to chat with him. Chu Xiu turned to Mr. Lu and asked, "Brother Li, are you also a member of the Yinma clan?" Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Friendly has nothing to do with my Yinma clan, he only has some relationship with my phaseless demon sect." Friend Li's lineage had a great background. Although it was only a single lineage, no one dared to look down on them. However, when it came to Friend Li's father's generation, there were some problems that caused his father to die early. That's why he entrusted our phaseless demon sect to help take care of Friend Li. Our phaseless demon sect's sect leader had received Friend Li's father's kindness in the past. In other words, if Friend Li's father was still alive, he should be one of the experts who stood at the peak of the Jianghu. Not to mention that Friend Li killed a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. Even if he killed the son of the Chunyang Dao sect's sect leader, his father would still be able to take it. At that time, our phaseless demon sect was hiding in the dark, so it wasn't convenient for us to fight against the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, we could only use some methods to help Friend Li conceal his identity and temporarily lay low. Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Chu Xiu finally understood what was going on back then. No wonder Chunyang Dao sect couldn't find Li Faolian even after searching 3 feet deep. It turned out that he had actually been hidden by the phaseless demon sect. Putting aside their strength, the phaseless demon sect's concealment skills were definitely top-notch. Li Faolian cupped his hands towards Mr. Lu and said, "I've already killed him. I've avenged half of the past. Mr. Lu, farewell for now." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Danger lurks everywhere in Xiaofan world. Be careful." Li Faolian nodded and turned to leave directly. Looking at Li Faolian's back, Chu Xiu said to Mr. Lu, "Coincidentally, Li Faolian's father died early in an accident. Didn't the Yinma lineage think of taking Li Faolian into the Yinma lineage?" Mr. Lu nodded and said, "Our phaseless demon sect really thought about this, but Li Faolian didn't agree. His lineage was neither righteous nor demonic, and basically did whatever he wanted. His father was an outstanding person of his generation. He had friends in all 3 lineages and was very popular. It was a pity that he died early. Otherwise, he would also be a distinguished figure of his generation." Li Faolian's father was kind to the sect master. Since Li Faolian wasn't willing, the sect master naturally wouldn't force him. Speaking of which, Li Faolian was also a pitiful person. His lineage was not ordinary people, and Li Faolian's father was even more so. He could be said to be handsome and elegant. He was very similar to that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. However, he was rather dissolute and left behind many dissolute debts in the Jianghu. Compared to Li Faolian's father, his mother was extremely ordinary. She wasn't even someone from the Jianghu. She was just an extremely ordinary-looking peasant girl. In the end, it was this peasant girl who made Li Faolian's father stop being dissolute. She even gave birth to Li Faolian. This made many people's jaws drop at that time. Li Faolian's appearance was also like his mother's. If he was like his father's, he probably wouldn't be much worse than that friend of yours, Lu Fengxian. There were almost no ugly people in his lineage. All of them were handsome and elegant. Although Li Faolian wasn't ugly, he was too mediocre. He didn't look like his ancestor at all. Originally, with Li Faolian's background, his life should have been smooth sailing. However, when his father died, he wasn't even 10 years old. His mother even followed his father in committing suicide. Therefore, he had to rely on himself for the past 20 years. It wasn't until he couldn't hold on anymore that he turned to the phaseless demon sect for help. I still remember that Li Faolian's personality was very lively when he was young. He took after his father. However, as you can see now, he was silent and treasured his words like gold. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk, but he didn't know how to talk at all. Although his father passed the inheritance to him when he died, he was afraid that someone would covet his lineage's inheritance. Therefore, he went to the 100,000 mountains alone to cultivate in the ancestral land of his lineage. Although it was called the ancestral land, it was actually a graveyard protected by a formation. It was accompanied by the dead all day long. It wasn't until he reached the unity of heaven and man level in his 20s that he came out of seclusion. However, at that time, Li Faolian even forgot how to speak. Hearing this, Chu Xiu nodded. To be honest, he really didn't expect Li Faolian's life to be so rough. The world could only see how glorious the group of geniuses ranked on the Longhu roll were, but in fact, everyone's strength didn't come out of nowhere. Although the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen was born with the thunder mark on his palm, who knew that in order to cultivate the thunder art, he even risked serious injuries to cultivate in a rainstorm to comprehend the concept of heavenly thunder? Wisdom King Zhongshuan's physical body was invincible among those of the same rank, but who knew the inhuman pain of cultivating the Moonlight King's glazed golden body? It was the same for Chu Xiu. From a nobody to the top 5 of the Longhu roll, how many enemies had Chu Xiu killed, and how many times had he fallen into desperate situations? Even the most unreliable Fang Qi Shao, a talkative guy, had once sat alone in seclusion for 81 days in order to comprehend the sword art. He didn't eat, drink, sleep, or rest. When he came out of seclusion, he was already haggard. The saying that one can only become a superior person after suffering the most hardships wasn't 100% reliable. However, those who obtained great power without any hardships were always in the minority. At this time, Mr. Lu suddenly looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "If the Yinma clan took Li Faolian in, do you think you can still receive such treatment? Aren't you afraid that the Yinma clan will cultivate Li Faolian with all their strength?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Those who can't bear to see others do well and rely on others to become kings are destined to be unsuccessful. Take Sword King City's Lin Kaiyun for example. Even without Fang Qi Shao, he wouldn't have become the strongest among the Sword King City's younger generation. I don't need to fear anyone. As long as I'm stronger than any of my competitors, that's enough." Mr. Lu nodded inwardly. Everyone could talk big, but he could hear from Chu Xiu's tone that Chu Xiu wasn't talking big. He was confident, extremely confident. Moreover, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he had the right to be confident. "By the way, Mr. Lu, how's the competition in the Blissful Demon Palace? Who got the most?" Mr. Lu's face darkened. "With the power of my Sky Demon formless art, it's most suitable to win in the chaos. I should have gotten the most. However, those guys from the righteous path like to outnumber me. When they saw that they couldn't stop me, the 3 of them joined hands, causing me to get a lot less. Even so, I still got about 20% of the treasures in the Blissful Demon Palace. By the way, your friends Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng aren't weak. Not only did they seize the initiative, they also took advantage of the chaos to snatch a lot of things when I was fighting those 3 guys. They're second only to us 4 martial Dao grandmasters." Chu Xiu nodded. It was fine as long as he didn't suffer any losses. Chu Xiu didn't ask Mr. Lu what he got. Although he had a good relationship with Mr. Lu, friendship was friendship, and rules were rules. Just like how Mr. Lu didn't ask Chu Xiu about the usage and origin of the 7-demon saber. Some things could be said by oneself, but it was taboo for others to ask. Although Mr. Lu was a martial Dao grandmaster now, in his opinion, Chu Xiu's potential and current combat strength had far surpassed most martial Dao grandmasters. Naturally, Mr. Lu wouldn't become enemies with Chu Xiu just for a few treasures. It wasn't worth it. It was no different from throwing away a watermelon to pick up a sesame seed. Chapter 572. After Chu Xiu recovered his strength, he was ready to act with Mr. Lu. Before the final battle, Chu Xiu did not intend to reveal his true identity. Although the identity of the Devil Path could not be used to its peak in a chaotic battle, it was actually much more useful than his public identity. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He asked Mr. Lu, "Mr. Lu, have you ever heard of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths?" Mr. Lu frowned and said, "You mean the lunatic from ancient times? How do you know him?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I got the hungry ghost incarnation of the Devil Venerable of 6 Paths." Chu Xiu had already used the hungry ghost incarnation before, so he did not need to hide it from Mr. Lu this time. Moreover, Chu Xiu was going to ask Mr. Lu for help to solve the problem of the hungry ghost incarnation. Mr. Lu was shocked when he heard this. You are not going to practice this evil method, are you? I advise you to stop thinking about it. The devil venerable of 6 paths is simply a lunatic. The cultivation method he passed down can only be practiced by lunatics. Now our Inma clan is not the same as the Kunlun devil cult in the past. If you dare to practice the evil method of the hungry ghost incarnation, our Inma clan can't protect you. Mr. Lu was a standard member of the devil path. Over the years, he had led the phaseless demon sect to do things in the dark and killed countless people. Therefore, what Mr. Lu cared about was not that the hungry ghost incarnation was against heaven and earth. If the Kunlun devil cult was still there, Chu Xiu could practice as he wanted. What he cared about was the consequences of practicing this evil method. After all, the righteous Wulin was now powerful. Once they found out, Chu Xiu would cause great trouble. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course I'm not going to practice it. In fact, I don't have the method to practice it." As he spoke, Chu Xiu briefly told Mr. Lu about Yu Xian and the incarnation of the hungry ghost realm. Mr. Lu stroked his chin and said, "So, you're the only one in this world who has an incarnation of the hungry ghost realm? This is also your good fortune, but it is also a problem." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It is indeed troublesome. That is why I wanted to ask Mr. Lu if you have any way to minimize the impact of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation. After all, the phaseless demon sect has done a lot of research in this area." The phaseless demon sect's techniques were all-inclusive, and the sky demon phaseless mystic technique was only one of them. There were also disguises, aura concealment, and even arrays, gu techniques, and other messy things. Perhaps the phaseless demon sect had a way to deal with the side effects of the hungry ghost Dao incarnation, so that it wouldn't get excited and swallow him. Mr. Lu pondered for a while and said, "I told you that the demonic venerable of 6 paths was a madman. Only a madman could cultivate something that was created by a madman. Right now, that hungry ghost realm incarnation is just a spirit. It only has instincts and no intelligence, so when it attacks, you naturally can't control it. That thing will only act according to its instincts. If this hungry ghost realm incarnation is refined, it will be equivalent to a clone of the demonic venerable of 6 paths. That guy has 6 extra personalities, and rumor has it that he has even researched the soul-splitting technique. When the time comes, he can cut off a personality and integrate it into one, then he can control it like a puppet. Naturally, he won't have to worry about the backlash. You don't have a split personality, so of course there will be problems if you use that madman's technique. It should be said that that guy's technique can only be cultivated by himself. Anyone else who cultivates it will have problems." With that said, Mr. Lu suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Puppet? I think of a person and I'll take you to meet him. I believe he should have a solution." Mr. Lu led Chu Xiu to the east and said, "The rogue cultivator of the Inma clan, demon puppeteer, Gong Shu Yuan, a guy with a strange temper. If he has a way to solve your problem, you have to give him something that can satisfy him first. Otherwise, that guy won't give face to anyone." Along the way, Mr. Lu also told Chu Xiu about the demon puppeteer Gong Shu Yuan. This person was also considered to be different in the diabolism. Gong Shu Yuan used to have an extraordinary background. He was a direct disciple of the Black Tortoise School, one of the 4 spirits, and even one of the successors of the Black Tortoise School. Among the 4 spirits, the Black Tortoise School was the most low-key, because most of the disciples of the Black Tortoise School were not good at fighting. They were good at making all kinds of mechanical tools, puppet traps, and the like. In fact, the Tang family fort in Sichuan was also good at making all kinds of mechanical hidden weapons. However, the Tang family fort was good at making some exquisite and powerful hidden weapons, most of which were dipped in poison. The ones made by the Black Tortoise School were not actually hidden weapons. They were just mechanical tools, large-scale war machines. For example, the Black Tortoise School once made 100 god-destroying crossbows for the Northern Yen. Each crossbow bolt was 10 feet long, and the body of the crossbow was engraved with formation patterns. Each bolt was individually made. It was said that one bolt could destroy a city, and even a martial Dao grandmaster would be pierced. Of course, this was only in theory. Big cities were protected by formations, and a crossbow bolt could not penetrate them. And small cities that could be penetrated by one bolt could be easily conquered by sending troops. Why would such a precious thing be needed? Moreover, using this thing to deal with martial Dao grandmasters was the same. Martial Dao grandmasters were not targets, so of course they would dodge. For example, if Chu Xiu stepped into the martial Dao grandmaster realm, these crossbow bolts would not even be able to touch him when he used the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. He could even use a straw boat to borrow the bolts. Therefore, this thing was of little value. Most importantly, the Northern Yen had been cheated once. The god-destroying crossbow that the Black Tortoise School gave to the Northern Yen only had one bolt, and they had to buy more after they ran out. In the end, the price of the bolt was the same as the body of the crossbow. It was simply a scam. Because of this, the old emperor of the Northern Yen, Xiang Long, almost beheaded the official who had bought these things. Of course, this was only an immature product of the Black Tortoise School. What the Black Tortoise School was really good at were puppets. They were mechanical puppets that looked like real people, and some of them were even comparable to martial Dao grandmasters. Refining a puppet was very complicated. One needed to be proficient in refining, formations, and martial arts at the same time. At the same time, the parts on each puppet were more than the bones in a human body. Some key parts also needed to be engraved with formation patterns. Therefore, the Black Tortoise School took years to refine a puppet. As the most outstanding disciple of the Black Tortoise School in the past, Gong Shu Yuan had once refined a qualified puppet when he was only at the three-flower realm. Although it was a little crude, its strength was better than most martial artists at the five-cheese origin realm. If he had developed normally, it would not have been a problem for Gong Shu Yuan to become the next leader of the Black Tortoise School. However, his mistake was that he was a little crazy when it came to refining puppets. He was not satisfied with using inanimate objects to refine puppets, so he secretly used human corpses to refine puppets. In the end, he even used living people to refine puppets. This was a big taboo in the Black Tortoise School. However, Gong Shu Yuan still did not think that he was wrong. In his opinion, puppets were originally avatars of martial artists. They pursued extreme lethality. What was the difference in materials used to refine them? In the end, Gong Shu Yuan was imprisoned by the angry leader of the Black Tortoise School. He wanted to hold a meeting to deal with him, but who would have thought that the puppet that Gong Shu Yuan had refined would be disguised as a disciple? He was released and thrown into the demonic path. Using people to refine puppets was evil everywhere. It was only in the demonic path that this kind of thing was not new. It was actually very normal. Mr. Lu led Chu Xiu for dozens of miles and arrived at a hidden valley. As they walked, Mr. Lu complained, "That guy Gong Shu Yuan is simply sick. Xiaofan Tian only opens once every 30 years. Everyone else comes here to find opportunities, but he comes here to find materials." After finding them, he actually started to refine puppets in the valley. He even said that this place is rich in spirit qi and is more suitable for carving formation patterns. It is a waste to give him the opportunity to open Xiaofan Tian. When Mr. Lu stepped into the valley, a dense golden formation pattern suddenly appeared in front of him. The golden formation pattern was like a blade that could tear through earth qi and flesh-treasured weapons. Every puppet master from the Divine Force School was also a formation master. Mr. Lu said unhappily, "It's me. Put away the formation." After a while, the formation disappeared. Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu stepped into the valley and saw a small old man squatting in a pile of messy parts. The small old man's hair was messy, and he was slovenly. He wore a dirty black robe. It was hard to imagine that he was a martial arts master. According to Mr. Lu, Gong Shu Yuan was an outstanding disciple of the Black Force School when he was young. He was also an outstanding figure in Jianghu. Now that he had become like this, only God knew what Gong Shu Yuan had experienced. Looking at Mr. Lu, Gong Shu Yuan said unhappily, "Lu Jin, I told you not to disturb me. What are you doing here?" Mr. Lu snorted and said, "Of course I have something to talk to you about. This is a young talent of my Inma branch, Lin Yi. You should have heard of his name. He needs your help with something." As he spoke, Mr. Lu told Gong Shu Yuan about the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. After listening, Gong Shu Yuan had a strange expression, but he was not as impatient as before. "Tiski, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path of the Six Paths Demon Lord? Interesting. Show me that thing first." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "It's here." Gong Shu Yuan said unhappily, "Of course it's here. If you don't look, how will I know how to solve it? There are two martial arts masters here. Are you afraid that you can't control the situation?" Hearing Gong Shu Yuan say this, Chu Xiu immediately mobilized his spiritual force and released the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. In an instant, the incarnation of the hungry ghost path was released. The evil aura that could devour and assimilate everything instantly erupted. Even the surrounding chi of heaven and earth was completely devoured. "Oh, take it back." Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand. Only then did Chu Xiu take back the incarnation of the hungry ghost path. However, in just a few seconds, his face was already a little pale. Mr. Lu asked, "Is there a way?" Gong Shu Yuan narrowed his eyes and said, "There is a way, and there is more than one. However, it is very difficult to bring out the greatest power of the incarnation of the hungry ghost path." "Lu Jin, you should know about puppets. What do you think of this thing?" Chapter 573. Hearing Gong Shu Yuan say the words human puppet, Lu Jin frowned and said, "You want to make those disgusting things again?" Gong Shu Yuan coldly snorted and said, "What do you mean disgusting? My human puppet is the masterpiece of puppet techniques developed to the peak, okay? Don't forget that you were surrounded by those bald donkeys from the Great Light Temple. If it wasn't for my human puppet coming to save you, I'm afraid you would have been killed by those bald donkeys." Lu Jin's face darkened and he quickly said, "Let's talk business. What are you planning to do?" At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly interrupted, "Let me interrupt. May I ask what this human puppet is?" Gong Shu Yuan proudly said, "Human puppets are the strongest puppet techniques in the world. They can be called a perfect masterpiece. In this world, only I know how to make them." Saying this, Gong Shu Yuan's eyes were filled with fanaticism. He wasn't being arrogant, but he truly believed it. In the Black Tortoise sect, the puppet technique is a kind of war mechanism. It's no different from those crossbow traps and the like. It's just that it's more flexible. But in my opinion, puppets are different from those things because puppets are mainly humanoid and imitate humans. They can even use martial techniques. Humans are the spirit of all living things, the strongest existence in the world. A newborn baby is not as good as a beast cub, and an adult human is not as good as a beast with sharp teeth. But the potential of humans is limitless. Martial experts can even tear dragons apart with their bare hands. Therefore, as a puppet that imitated a human form, its strength was the strongest. It was 10,000 times stronger than those ferocious tiger puppets or dragon-shaped puppets. But in the past, those fellows only used all kinds of materials to make puppets. Inanimate objects can't compare to humans, so I chose to use humans as materials to make human puppets. I engraved formation patterns on the human body and embedded them into mechanisms. Finally, it will become the strongest human puppet. Mr. Lu lightly said, "So this is why you cut people into 8 pieces and cut them into tens of thousands of pieces, even more ruthless than death by 1,000 cuts? What do you know?" With that, Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand, and a swordsman shrouded in a black robe and wearing a bamboo had appeared in front of Gong Shu Yuan with a long sword in his hand. The swordsman didn't have any vitality. It wasn't a living person, and living people couldn't be stored in space boxes. Following Gong Shu Yuan's action, the swordsman took off his bamboo hat, revealing an extremely terrifying face. His face was densely covered with knife scars, but they were sewn together by golden threads. Moreover, there were also densely packed runes engraved on the knife scars. They were very small and looked like tadpole characters. The swordsman's eyes were replaced with a pair of black crystals, and the runes were also constantly flashing. Under Gong Shu Yuan's control, the swordsman slashed at the valley. Sword energy soared to the heavens, and one slash actually cut off a cliff. This swordsman had the strength of a martial Dao grandmaster. Gong Shu Yuan smiled proudly and said, "This is the first grandmaster-level human puppet I've successfully made. It used to be a grandmaster-level expert of the sword hut, through Heaven's Sword, Hua buffing. He wanted to kill me, but I killed him instead. In the end, I refined him into a puppet. This is the first time I used a grandmaster-level material to make a puppet, so I'm a bit rusty. Even though I added a lot of things later on, this puppet can only display less than 50% of its original strength. If I were to do it now, I could at least display 80%. Gong Shu Yuan turned his gaze to Chu Xiu and said, "The hungry ghost Dao incarnation originally had a body, a soul, a body, and a part of the Six Paths Demon Venerable's intelligence. This is the complete hungry ghost Dao incarnation. Right now, you only have a soul, so I refined a human puppet for you. It can be used as a container to store the soul. When it attacks, it can swallow everything, but you don't have to worry about it swallowing you as well. However, you are not a lunatic, so you can't merge a bit of intelligence into the puppet. However, this is not a problem. I will teach you how to control the puppet. You don't have to worry about the soul, you can directly control the puppet. Of course, this way, its power cannot compare to the original Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation. According to my estimates, 50% to 60% of its power is the limit. Moreover, the soul of the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation can grow by swallowing, but a puppet is a dead object and cannot grow. So, in theory, if your Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation swallows too many things, and its strength grows beyond the puppet's limit, you will have to change the puppet's container. Of course, the prerequisite is that I am still alive at that time." Gong Shu Yuan's last sentence was said very indifferently. With his identity, he also liked to look for all kinds of materials to refine all kinds of strange things. He might offend someone. Even he himself couldn't guarantee how long he could live. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Since Senior Gong Shu is confident, then we will do as Senior Gong Shu says." Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand and said, "Wait, there is something that hasn't been made clear yet. If you want me to refine a human puppet for you, you need to pay. Even if you are an outstanding talent cultivated by the Hidden Devil faction, you are not my disciple. In the future, you can't take care of me when I die. Why should I waste energy to refine a human puppet for you?" Gong Shu Yuan's words were very realistic, but Mr. Liu had already prepared Chu Xiu, so at this time, Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He only said lightly, "What does Senior Gong Shu need?" Gong Shu Yuan sneered and said, "That depends on what you have first. I don't like ordinary things." In Gong Shu Yuan's view, no matter how strong Lin Yi was, he was only a junior martial artist. What good things could he have? He was afraid that he would need the Hidden Devil faction to help him. Mr. Liu said, "Gong Shu Yuan, don't you need a tantric cultivation method to use as a reference for the puppet's ability? Is an orthodox tantric incantation of the Sixth Revolution and above enough?" Gong Shu Yuan's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Oh, you actually have such a thing?" Refining a human puppet was very complicated. Although Gong Shu Yuan did not care about his appearance, he could be said to be very knowledgeable. From mechanisms to formations, to martial Dao mysteries, there was almost nothing he didn't know. Moreover, the puppet's ability was different. This meant that Gong Shu Yuan needed to understand a lot of martial Dao. There was no need to talk about the three factions of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic. He even needed to understand the saber path and the sword path. Of these, he could easily handle the cultivation methods of Taoism and demonic. There was no need to talk about the demonic path. There were 3,000 Taoist sects in ancient times. Actually, most of the cultivation methods now had some traces of Taoist cultivation methods. With Gong Shu Yuan's ability and status, it was not a problem for him to obtain Taoist cultivation methods. The only thing that was more difficult was the Buddhist cultivation methods. Currently, the Great Light Temple and Subodhi Monastery were the two dominant sections. 90% of the Buddhist heritage was in these two sections. Furthermore, as a mainstream branch of the Buddhist sect, the Tantric sect was very small. Although Gong Shu Yuan had a few Tantric cultivation methods, they were not considered strong. Lu Jin said to Chu Xiu, Your fast and slow 9 words formula is an orthodox tantric seal technique. Just pick one and give it to this old guy." As he said this, Lu Jin gave Chu Xiu a look, indicating that Gong Shu Yuan could be trusted. After all, the fast and slow 9 words formula was actually one of Chu Xiu's signature cultivation methods. If he took out the fast and slow 9 words formula in front of Gong Shu Yuan, it was basically equivalent to admitting his identity. Chu Xiu nodded. He would not randomly throw a seal technique to Gong Shu Yuan, so he directly asked, "What kind of seal technique does Senior Gong Shu need?" "The seal technique in my hand is a cultivation method that combines the essence of tantric martial arts. It combines offensive and defensive techniques, and even speed and healing techniques. Every seal technique has a different effect." Gong Shu Yuan said, "Of course, I want an offensive seal technique. Tantric seal techniques are big and fierce. Only offensive seal techniques are representative of tantric seal techniques." As he said this, Gong Shu Yuan directly threw a jade slip to Chu Xiu and said, "Just use your mind power to imprint the cultivation method here." Gong Shu Yuan was actually considered an array Dao Grand Master, so the technique transmission jade slip was nothing to him. After Chu Xiu imbued the Great Vajra Wheel seal into the seal technique, Gong Shu Yuan took a look and immediately praised, "It is indeed the orthodox Vajra seal of Tantric. The Great Tao is the simplest. The power of Vajra slays evil and vanquishes demons. There is no need for so many transformations. Only power is the ultimate." Mr. Lu snorted and said, "You are a demon now. Are you going to surrender yourself? I've given it to you. Quickly think of how to refine a human puppet." Gong Shu Yuan spread his hands and said, "How can I refine it without materials? Ordinary unity of heaven and man realm martial artists cannot fuse with the hungry ghost Tao incarnation, unless it is someone like Wisdom King Zhongxian from the Great Light Temple. However, killing Zhongxian is 100 times more difficult than killing a martial arts grandmaster. So, you should kill a martial arts grandmaster first. Remember, it needs to be fresh. Otherwise, when the blood and qi are drained, the strength of the puppet will decrease." Mr. Lu frowned and said, "Kill a martial arts grandmaster? That's easy for you to say. Martial arts grandmasters are not cats or dogs who will stand there and let you kill them. If I had known, we would have taken Zhen Yangzi's corpse away." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "We can't take it away. Taoist Guang Ning and Zhen Yangzi are both from the 3 main Taoist sections. It's fine that he couldn't stop me from killing Zhen Yangzi, but how could he let me snatch Zhen Yangzi's corpse? However, if we want the corpse, we might as well kill someone. The Saintess has wanted that person dead for a long time. This is a good opportunity to kill him openly." Mr. Lu asked, "Who are you talking about?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Guanzhong Torture Room, the head of the arrest department, 5 Technique Sword, and Lionian. Once this person is dead, the Saintess and I will work together, and the Guanzhong Torture Room will be easily obtained. We can totally turn the entire Guanzhong Torture Room into our hidden devil lineage's secret ground." Chapter 574. Mr. Lu knew that Mei Qinglian had designs on the Guanzhong Torture Room. Otherwise, as the dignified holy maiden of the Yin Demon sect and a martial arts grandmaster, Mei Qinglian would be able to do well with her strength and connections in the Hidden Devil sect, even if the Yin Demon sect only existed in name. Why would she bother to become Guan Xiu's wife? In any case, in Mr. Lu's opinion, although Guan Xiu was also a figure in the pugilistic world, he was not worthy of Mei Qinglian. However, Mr. Lu didn't expect that Chu Xiu, who had only joined the Guanzhong Torture Room for a few years, would actually have designs on the Guanzhong Torture Room. In fact, even Chu Xiu himself did not know when he had come up with this idea. Perhaps it was because he was getting stronger and stronger, or perhaps it was because he had more and more subordinates, but he needed a place where he could truly settle down. The Guanzhong Torture Room had his foundation, and it was neither righteous nor demonic, so it was just right. Most importantly, Chu Xiu actually felt that Mei Qinglian was a little too hesitant in taking action. It had been so many years, but she still hadn't taken down the Guanzhong Torture Room. Perhaps this was the difference between women and men. Women always considered a lot of things, but if it was Chu Xiu, his choice would be very rough. Mr. Lu rubbed his chin and said, if in Liaoyan wasn't with Guan Xiu, I could consider taking action. However, killing in Liaoyan is easy. If you want to control the Guanzhong torture room, you first have to get rid of Guan Xiu. Although I feel that Guan Xiu is not worthy of the Holy Maiden, I have to admit that Guan Xiu is indeed a top-notch figure. He might not be so easily bewitched by the Holy Maiden. Although the Yin demon sex beauty technique is magical, I keep feeling that something is wrong. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. I also asked the Saintess about this matter, but she said that everything was under her control. In fact, it was the Saintess who suggested Guan Xiu to do so that I could enter Xiaofan heaven this time. Otherwise, the 3 keys to the Guanzhong punishment hall would have fallen into the hands of the 3 martial Dao masters. Mr. Lu nodded and said, this is also what I'm puzzled about. The Holy Maiden also said that Guan Xiu trusts and relies on her enough. The enchanted maiden art is very sensitive to this kind of subtle spiritual fluctuation. If something is wrong with Guan Xiu, the Saintess should be able to sense it. After saying that, Mr. Lu laughed self-deprecatingly and said, forget it, let's not think about this for now. How are you going to deal with in Liaoyan? I don't know much about this person's strength. Mei Qinglian's real age was actually about the same as Mr. Lu's. It was just that she was very young when she stepped into the 3-flower realm and the martial Dao master realm, which had a very important impact on one's appearance. That was why she was able to maintain her current beautiful appearance without looking old at all. Generally, when a martial artist stepped into the 3-flower realm very early, their appearance would stay in this realm for a long time. If you step into the martial Dao Grand Master realm again before your appearance deteriorates during this period of time, your youthful appearance can still be preserved. Therefore, it was not strange at all for some of the martial Dao masters in their prime to look middle-aged while some looked young. It could only prove that they were stronger than you when they were young. It was the same for Mei Qinglian. No matter when, her strength was always above Mr. Lu. Therefore, it was not Mr. Lu's place to remind Mei Qinglian about this kind of thing. It was fine as long as she knew what she was doing. Chu Xiu did not dwell too much on this issue. He narrowed his eyes and said, it's simple. I need the 2 of you to put on a show with me. Gong Shu Yuan said from the side, acting isn't a problem, but you have to be careful. When you kill them, you have to be careful. Don't damage their bodies. Otherwise, a broken body can't be refined into a puppet. Of course, it would be even better if you can capture him alive. Refining a human puppet with a living person would at least have 70% of his strength. Mr. Lu and Chu Xiu looked at each other. They were confident in killing a martial Dao master, but capturing a martial Dao master alive was a bit of a fantasy. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone a martial Dao master realm powerhouse. Most people would have the guts to fight with their lives at a critical moment. If Chu Xiu wanted to kill in Liaoyan, he would first have to find him. Although Xiaofan heaven was large, the probability of encountering other martial artists was not low. If they could communicate with each other, it would be easy to locate in Liaoyan. However, things like voice transmission jade slips could not be used in Xiaofan heaven. Therefore, Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu could only use the simplest method, which was to ask the hidden Devil Clan martial artists who had entered. Therefore, their speed was a little slow, and they did not dare to go too fast. Anyway, there were opportunities and secret treasures everywhere in Xiaofan heaven. It was not a big deal if they could not find in Liaoyan. They would eventually have a chance to meet him. Fortunately, Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu did not have to wait until the end. 2 days later, a disciple of the Hidden Devil Clan met in Liaoyan and gave Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu a rough location. If in Liaoyan was not in a hurry, he should not have been able to escape this area. At this moment, in Liaoyan wasn't in a rush to travel, but his face was a little dark. That's because he had experienced the baptism of spiritual energy in the past few days in the minor mortal sky, increasing his foundation a little, but he hadn't accomplished a single thing that he wanted to do. It was not that in Liaoyan was too incompetent, but he did not know if there was some kind of pattern to the rules in Xiaofan heaven. It was clearly a random teleportation, but Liuyan ended up being teleported together with several other martial Dao masters. Although Liuyan was not arrogant about his strength, he was very confident. He dared to fight one or two people, but there were several of them. Of course, Liuyan could not compete with them, so he left after obtaining a few items. In the end, Liuyan was unlucky to discover that he did not seem to have obtained anything useful, but even some of the younger martial artists had obtained more than him. As for Liuyan, he could not bring himself to rob these younger generation cultivators. This was not because Liuyan was kind or anything, but because he could not afford to lose face. It was that simple. Just as Liuyan was letting his imagination run wild, two figures sped over from afar. When they saw Liuyan, one of them hurriedly shouted, "Great leader!" Liuyan frowned even harder when he saw this person, as he hated Chu Xiu very much. Chu Xiu had already changed back to his previous attire. Behind him was a human puppet dressed in black and holding a long sword. However, the human puppet was currently surrounded by demonic flames, concealing the deathly aura on its body. In fact, Liuyan did not have any feelings for Chu Xiu previously, nor would he target him just because he was Guan Xiyu's subordinate. Most of the people in the Guanzhong torture room were Guan Xiyu's subordinates, so he could not possibly target all of them. Liuyan hated Chu Xiu only because he was too close to that which Mei Qinglian. In the past, he had lost to Chu Kuanga for the position of Guanzhong torture room's hall master. Subsequently, he had also lost to Guan Xiyu. However, Guan Xiyu had done a better job in her position. Therefore, Liuyan did not choose to cause trouble in secret. He only wanted to retain a portion of his authority. After all, internal strife would harm the Guanzhong torture room itself. As someone who had grown up in the Guanzhong torture room, Liuyan sincerely hoped that the Guanzhong torture room would become stronger and more prosperous. Therefore, even though he had his own selfish motives, he would not harm the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. However, from Liuyan's point of view, Guan Xiyu had been bewitched by that demon woman to the point of losing his bearings. He had even listened to the demon woman's words to allow a junior like Chu Xiu to enter the minor Fan Tian. Chu Xiu and that which were clearly birds of a feather. Therefore, Liuyan had no intention of interfering when he saw Chu Xiu being chased. He sneered and said, "You want to enter the Xiaofan heaven to fight with others when you are not strong enough? You are courting death. What were you thinking back then?" As Chu Xiu fled, he shouted, "Great leader, there is an ancient relic in front. There are only some juniors from the Devil Dao guarding it. You saved me, so I will bring you there. We will split the items inside 50-50. Liuyan's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. However, he sneered and said, "You are being chased like a stray dog, yet you still dare to say that you will split it 50-50 with me? Everything inside is mine. Only the things that I don't fancy are yours." Chu Xiu gritted his teeth and put on a sullen expression. At that moment, the human puppet behind him slashed out with its sword. Torrential demonic chi swept over with immense might. The puppet used to be a grandmaster of the sword hut, so it was not weak in the first place. Although it had been refined into a puppet and its attacks were extremely stiff, no one would be able to see through it unless it was someone familiar to the grandmaster when he was alive. Chu Xiu hurriedly dodged as he shouted, "We will do as you say, great leader." Liuyan sneered. He raised his hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. The blade was extremely sharp, and the power of Eugene transformed into a boundless blade that sent the human puppet flying with a single slash. Chu Xiu's eyebrows twitched slightly. This was not an act of the human puppet, but Liuyan's own strength. As expected of a senior martial artist who had the right to compete with Guan Xiyu for the position of hall master in the Guanzhong torture room back then. His strength was indeed extraordinary. At that moment, the human puppet spoke in a hoarse voice that sounded like a machine grinding against itself. "How dare you snatch someone from my hidden devil lineage?" Liuyan sneered and said, "You hidden devil lineage don't even dare to reveal your full strength. Who are you trying to scare now? Ridiculous." With that, Liuyan drew the other sword on his back. In that instant, crimson sword chi erupted. Under the blazing sword intent, even the demonic chi around the human puppet was completely suppressed. Chapter 575. And Liuyan's 5-technique sword had gathered the power of the 5 elements. Its might had even exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations. Human puppets were just puppets, after all. Gong Shu Yuan had said that they could retain the strength they had when they were alive, but he had only been referring to their basic strength. However, a warrior's combat strength wasn't just related to strength. It also had to do with their willpower, combat experience, and other things that human puppets lacked. Therefore, in its battle with Liuyan, the human puppet had been suppressed in almost every aspect. In the end, it had retreated and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Liuyan, how dare the Guanzhong torture room? I'll remember this. We'll settle this score in the future." After speaking, the human puppet turned and fled. Chu Xiu, who was behind it, cursed inwardly. Was Gong Shu Yuan's head frozen from refining puppets? To think that he had made such a low-level mistake. The Guanzhong torture room kept a low profile in the pugilistic world, but in Liuyan was even more so. While most people knew that the Guanzhong torture room had a department called the Criminal Investigations Department, they didn't even know about Fang Sha and Si Ming, who were the most frequent visitors, let alone Liuyan, who spent most of his time in seclusion. Therefore, there were many suspicious points in Gong Shu Yuan's words through the human puppet. Fortunately, Liuyan didn't sense anything amiss. Actually, when Guan Xiu had just inherited the position of Hall Master, Liuyan had been rather famous in the pugilistic world. After all, most people had believed that Liuyan would inherit the position of Hall Master of the Guanzhong torture room and not Guan Xiu. Therefore, Liuyan's reputation had actually been greater than Guan Xiu's. In addition, Liuyan hadn't stepped into the pugilistic world for many years, so he had forgotten that people in the pugilistic world were very forgetful. Apart from some of the factions that had been close to the Guanzhong torture room in the past, most people had already forgotten about him. Looking at Chu Xiu, Liuyan asked coldly, "Where is the relic?" Chu Xiu replied, "It's just up ahead. Great leader, please follow me." Liuyan grunted coldly and said, "Don't even think about playing any tricks. Don't think that you're on equal footing with us just because you're Guan Xiu's trusted aide and defeated Fang Sha. In the past, when Chu Kuanga was the Hall Master, I led the punishment division to slaughter in the Jianghu. At that time, not to mention a junior like you, even Guan Xiu was still a lowly constable of the Jianghu in the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu lowered his head and nodded in acknowledgement. He acted as if he wanted to retort but was holding back for the time being. Liuyan did not find anything wrong with this. It would be strange if Chu Xiu didn't react at all and directly admitted defeat. However, it didn't matter. He didn't need Chu Xiu to be convinced. He just needed Chu Xiu to bring him to the ruins. There must be a lot of good stuff in the ruins for a martial Dao master of the Hidden Devil clan to come after him. Chu Xiu led Liuyan to a remote valley, which made him frown slightly. The spiritual qi in Xiaofan heaven was abundant, but there were strong and weak ones as well. Most of the ruins were in places with abundant spiritual qi. However, the spiritual qi in this valley was very thin. Someone had actually built a sect here? Chu Xiu led the way into the valley. Liuyan didn't think too much when he saw Chu Xiu enter first and directly stepped in. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu shouted, "Oh no! Someone else got here first." Liuyan immediately walked over and asked, "What happened?" Chu Xiu pointed to the black corpses lying on the ground in a circle in front of the valley entrance and said, "These are the warriors from the Hidden Devil clan who were in charge of guarding the ruins. Now that they're all dead here, it's likely that someone beat me to it when I was being hunted down." Liuyan looked at Chu Xiu suspiciously. "Is there such a coincidence? Are you trying to trick me? There are no ruins here at all." Chu Xiu hurriedly said, "How would I dare lie to you, Chief? These corpses are still fresh, so they were obviously just killed." Liuyan was still a little doubtful when he heard that. Chu Xiu didn't have a good reputation in the Guanzhong torture room, so he had always suspected that there were ruins in another place. This place was a place that Chu Xiu had been to previously, but he had already ransacked it. He had also killed the people and lied to Liuyan that someone had beaten him to it. And Liuyan was indeed a warrior from the Guanzhong torture hall. Although he had long since ceased to be a constable of the Jianghu, his professionalism was still very strong. In a short moment, he had been able to deduce so many things in his mind. Therefore, with his suspicions, Liuyan was prepared to personally check the corpses to see if they had really died at the hands of Chu Xiu. However, just as Liuyan walked towards those corpses suddenly leapt to their feet. Threads were connected in their hands, and the light of the array formation flowed into them. It was like an inescapable net that enveloped Liuyan. It was only then that Liuyan noticed that these corpses weren't dead at all. They were repulsive puppets draped in human skin. Scram! Liuyan unsheathed his golden sword and unleashed the sharpness of Yujin's aura to the extreme. Those puppets that were only at the unity of heaven and man realm were directly sent flying. However, the threads didn't move at all as they continued to attack Liuyan. Gong Shuyuan leaped down from the valley and laughed loudly. Don't waste your effort. It's useless. This is a god-binding net that I weaved using the silk of countless strange insects such as the Snow Domain Ice Silkworm, the North Sea Water Silkworm, and the Southern Border Gold Silkworm. Even divine weapons can't cut it. However, Liuyan's attention wasn't on Gong Shuyuan. Instead, it was on something behind him. The instant Liuyan had been ambushed, he had thought of something. Since this was a trap, what role did Chu Xiu, who had lured him here, play? Therefore, at this moment, Liuyan immediately turned around. The 4 swords behind him were all unsheathed, and the power of the 5 elements erupted. Liuyan stabbed out with his sword, and the 5-colored sword aura drew in the power of the heavens and the earth. Although he was alone, he had set up an extremely powerful sword formation. Behind him, Chu Xiu didn't use trump cards like the Hungry Ghost Dao Incarnation or the 7 Demon Blades. These things consumed too much energy. Furthermore, Gong Shuyuan had said that it was best to capture him alive. Therefore, Chu Xiu immediately formed hand seals. Buddhist light shone from his body as he executed the great sun-shifting technique. Vairocana's illusory figure shrouded the sun and moon within the boundless Buddhist light. Sun shifting steals the heavens. The palm of Vairocana collided with the 5 elemental sword formation. An extremely powerful shockwave suddenly erupted, forcing Liuyan to take a few steps back. A look of shock appeared in his eyes. He had miscalculated. This was Chu Xiu's true strength. Liuyan had only seen Chu Xiu attack once, which was against Fang Sha. However, Fang Sha hadn't used his trump card, and Chu Xiu hadn't used his full strength either. The reason why Chu Xiu had been able to defeat Fang Sha so easily was because Fang Sha had underestimated him. Secondly, Chu Xiu's grasp of the battle rhythm was too outstanding. He wasn't inferior to martial Dao masters like them. Therefore, Liuyan could only tell that Chu Xiu was pretty strong during that battle. However, he didn't think that Chu Xiu was strong enough to threaten him. Now that the great sun-changing technique had been unleashed, he could feel its power. Other things aside, Chu Xiu's explosive power alone was already comparable to his. If he had known how strong Chu Xiu was, he wouldn't have been fooled right from the beginning. Although the demonic grandmaster who was chasing after Chu Xiu had decent strength, he wasn't considered strong. With Chu Xiu's strength, let alone being chased by him, he could even kill him. However, it was too late now. All Liuyan wanted to do was to escape the encirclement. At that moment, Gong Shuyuan yelled in distress, "Be careful when you attack. Don't damage my god-binding net." As soon as he said that, he saw Liuyan performing a sword seal. In an instant, the other 4 swords followed closely behind the golden sword. As he slashed with his sword, a sharp golden sword gleam slashed out, tearing everything apart. The god-binding net was instantly slashed apart. The power of the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. After the other 4 swords reinforced and restrained each other, they transferred their power to the golden sword, allowing the sharpness of the net to be unleashed to the extreme. The god-binding net could only defend against divine weapons in theory. However, The might unleashed by a divine weapon coupled with a martialist's martial arts technique was not certain. When he saw this, Gong Shu Yuan's heart ached so much that he trembled. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have helped. The golden sword was sharp, while the water sword was soft. A transparent ripple erupted from the water sword in Liu Yan's hand. As he slashed with his sword, the air before him fluctuated. And Liu Yan's figure also moved according to the rhythm of the ripple. He was like a swimming fish as he rapidly fled out of the valley. However, at this moment, he was shocked to discover that even though he was only less than 300 meters away from the exit of the valley and could escape in a few breaths' time, it was as if he was walking on the spot. The exit was still so far away. When he looked around, there was no longer any valley. It was pitch black all around him. The Yellow Springs River flowed on the ground, and countless evil spirits roared at him. In the sky, there was even a seductive demonic woman dancing around, stirring up his desire. Shatter! The 5 swords circled around Liu Yan's body, eventually turning into a scorching red color. The 5 swords slashed out in unison, and the scorching sword intent burned away all the evil spirits and filth, revealing Mr. Lu's figure before him. Phaseless Demon Sect. And Liu Yan's eyes immediately widened. He didn't recognize Gong Shu Yuan, but the Phaseless Demon Sect's Sky Demon Formless technique was still very famous. Turning his head towards Chu Xiu, Liu Yan gritted his teeth and said, "Chu Xiu, so you're actually colluding with demons. Damn it. You really deserve to die." At this moment, what Liu Yan was thinking about was not his own safety, but the future of the Guanzhong torture room. A fellow who was colluding with demons had infiltrated the Guanzhong torture room and even become one of the 4 torturers, Guan Siyu's trusted aide. With such a fellow with ill intentions around, Liu Yan didn't dare to imagine what the future of the Guanzhong torture room would be like. Chapter 576. Both Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu smiled when they heard Liu Yan say that he had colluded with the demonic path. However, they were only here to kill today, and a dead man did not need to know too many things, nor did they need to talk to him before he died to ease his nervousness. Therefore, there was no need to talk nonsense, and they could just kill him directly. Chu Xiu unsheathed the heavenly demon dance and slashed out with the 3 blades of Avicii. Monstrous demonic flames surged, and the power was not inferior to Liu Yan's 5 technique sword at all. The 3 blades of Avicii was a demonic blade, but its core concept was hatred. It was a blade of hell that carried madness and hatred. It was precisely because of the 3 blades of Avicii that Chu Xiu was able to suppress the blade of hatred when he used the 7 demon blades. The power he needed to use was much less than when he used the greedy blade or other blades. At this moment, when Chu Xiu used the 3 blades of Avicii again, he suddenly had a new understanding. The side effects of the 7 demon blades were very great, so it was actually only a half-finished product. The master refiner of the Black Demon Tower had wanted to gather the experts of the Black Demon Tower to research a technique that could be used with the 7 demon blades. However, the Black Demon Tower was destroyed because of the great ancient calamity. No one knew whether the people inside were dead or alive, so the technique was naturally not researched. However, just because they could not research it did not mean that the current Chu Xiu could not. Since he could control the power of hatred through the 3 blades of Avicii, why could he not try to control the power of greed, anger, obsession, love, evil desire, and so on? As long as he could completely control the power of the 7 emotions and integrate it into the demonic blade, would it mean that he could counteract the side effects of the 7 demon blades? With that thought in mind, Chu Xiu slashed out once again. This time, there were no longer any traces of the 3 saber techniques of Avicenaraka. Only the saber intent was similar, and it looked like it was filled with overwhelming hatred. Mr. Lu was shocked. If it was not for the fact that Chu Xiu was holding the heavenly demon dance, he would have thought that Chu Xiu had used his trump card, the 7 demon blades. Previously, they had discussed that if they could capture him alive, they would do their best to capture him alive. However, Chu Xiu had already used his trump card. This was not right. As the blade slashed down, boundless hatred surged out from the pitch-black demonic chi. At the same time, it also triggered Liu Yan's own hatred. The hatred in Liuyan's heart was very simple. He hated the world for being unfair to him. It was his honor to be born in the same era as Chu Kuanga, but it was also his sorrow. He was honored that he was able to witness the rise and fall of a great hero, a legend of the Jianghu. Sadly, he was not even qualified to serve as a foil to the hero. But to be born in the same era as Guanxiu was also his honor and sorrow. He was honored that he who had been nurtured and raised by the Guanzhong torture room would one day be able to witness the true prosperity and stability of the Guanzhong torture room, establishing a foothold in the Jianghu. Their strength would far surpass that of their predecessors in the Guanzhong torture room. Sadly, the one who had created all of this was not him, but his opponent. Although his heart belonged to the Guanzhong torture room, he would most likely be a negative character in the records of the Guanzhong torture room in the future. He would be an ambitious great leader of the criminal division who did not listen to the hall master's orders and controlled his army. Now, facing Chu Xiu, Liuyan no longer felt sorrow or honor. He only felt hatred. His eyes were slightly red, and the force of the sword in Liuyan's hands even became a little violent. However, it was also starting to become chaotic and unstable. For a swordsman, it was a very terrifying thing to be unable to control the force of the sword. As an opening was discovered by Chu Xiu, he slashed down with the heavenly demon dance. That hateful strike was unleashed to the extreme, completely shattering the golden sword in Liuyan's hands. And Liuyan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood as the blade entered his body. However, it was also because of this mouthful of blood that a hint of clarity flashed in his eyes, and he did not continue to be lost in that hatred. At this moment, Liuyan had woken up, while Chu Xiu had entered a state of enlightenment. There was no longer any enemy before him. There was only his own blade, as well as the sword intent that was filled with overwhelming hatred. Mr. Liu also noticed that something was wrong with Chu Xiu. However, he then heaved a sigh of relief and even nodded with a smile, revealing a hint of satisfaction on his face. As expected of the phaseless demon sect, Chu Xiu was the first genius that Mr. Liu had set his eyes on. To think that he had actually entered a state of enlightenment during a battle. Enlightenment was a very mysterious thing for warriors. Regardless of whether it was Taoism, Buddhism, or demon, everyone knew that after entering a state of enlightenment, one's thoughts would be like a heavenly steed soaring into the sky, and one might be able to comprehend something. However, no matter what one comprehended, it would all belong to them. Outsiders would not even be able to replicate it, as no one's enlightenment would be exactly the same. However, the majority of martial artists would have an epiphany when they saw two powerhouses fight, or when they saw something that touched their heartstrings, or when they saw a magnificent scenery that touched their state of mind. Only then would they have an epiphany. Legend had it that the junior celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen, had entered a state of enlightenment while bathing in thunderstorms on a stormy day. He had even used his one with heaven realm cultivation to draw in the power of thunder and imprint a lightning mark on a cliff on Mount Longhu. Now, however, Chu Xiu had entered a state of enlightenment during a battle. This was very rare, and it was also the easiest for danger and others to interrupt him. Therefore, Mr. Liu had been guarding beside Chu Xiu. He did not attack too intensely, as he only wanted to prevent Liuyan from counterattacking. At this moment, Chu Xiu's mental state was indeed very mysterious, and it could be described as a heavenly steed soaring into the sky. The saber intent of the hatred blade could be cultivated. One had to understand this power, use it, and then suppress it until one could control it. Back when he had cultivated the 3 sabers of Avicii, Chu Xiu had done this. Now that he had come into contact with the power of the hatred blade, he could even use the sky demon dance to simulate 70% of the power of the hatred blade. The more he used it, the more proficient he became, and the hatred blade was now completely under his control. Moreover, Chu Xiu could use the same method with the other sabers. He would first use the 7 demon sabers, then comprehend the power within them. Finally, he would transform the essence of the power into his own, and finally, he would be able to control the 7 demon sabers perfectly. Chu Xiu did not know if this was considered a cultivation method, but he knew that if his deduction was correct, he would be able to control the power of the 7 demon sabers perfectly in the future. Moreover, the most important thing was not the 7 demon sabers, but the fact that Chu Xiu could control the 7 emotions, which did not belong to the power of heaven and earth, but the emotional power that was rooted in human nature. Chu Xiu had not told anyone about these realizations. If he were to discuss it with a martial arts master like Qinqing Di, Chu Xiu would know that his current understanding of the martial way was already stronger than most martial arts masters. The martial way, any cultivation method, and any martial arts technique would eventually become a kind of Tao. It was like an obscure sentence that was extremely concise and pointed to the core. This was the Tao. However, most people could not comprehend this Tao. Therefore, martial arts masters who had comprehended this Tao would annotate this sentence. Although it seemed extremely complicated, from a dozen words to hundreds of thousands of words, it allowed more people to understand it. Even if they only understood a little, they would be able to unleash a certain amount of power. This was the true essence of martial arts cultivation methods. When a cultivation method was cultivated to the extreme and completely comprehended, one would naturally come into contact with the Tao within. Therefore, ordinary martial artists would first cultivate the cultivation method, then progress from small success to great success, and finally to the extreme. Only after comprehending the Tao within would one be considered to have reached perfection. Currently, Chu Xiu was directly comprehending the Tao within, which was similar to that of a martial arts master. It was just that he had not completely perfected a cultivation method that could pass on this Tao. At this moment, Lionian had clearly also noticed Chu Xiu's state. However, with Mr. Lu harassing him from the side, he did not even have the chance to interrupt Chu Xiu's enlightenment. Most importantly, Lionian only wanted to escape. How could he have the spare time to think about interrupting Chu Xiu's enlightenment? Seeing that Mr. Lu was hot on his heels, Chu Xiu was about to complete his enlightenment, and Gong Shu Yuan was watching coldly from the side, and Lionian gritted his teeth. The blood around him boiled, and he actually condensed a blood sword with his own blood. Actually, Lionian's martial way was an ancient sword cultivation method. It was very ancient, so ancient that even in ancient times, not many people would cultivate it. And Lionian's 5 sword techniques first required him to use his blood and willpower to refine the sword in his hand. Then, he would cultivate a sword technique in tandem with his own sword. Finally, he would reach the stage where his heart and mind were connected. This kind of sword cultivation method was too complicated. Moreover, once something happened to one's weapon, it would be a very serious blow to one's strength. Therefore, this kind of sword cultivation method was slowly eliminated, and not many people would cultivate it. However, the reason why this kind of sword cultivation method was eliminated was not because it was not strong enough, but because it was too complicated. Therefore, it was not used by the large sections. However, this technique was a treasure to Lionian, who had been a mere constable in the pugilistic world back then. He had relied on this outdated sword technique to cultivate all the way to his current level. Now that Lionian's golden sword had shattered, it matched the ancient martial art practitioner's evaluation of this kind of sword cultivation method's flaws. However, Lionian had considered this before. Once his 5 sword techniques were destroyed, it meant that he was at the end of his rope. Since it had already come to this, he definitely had to fight with his life on the line. At this time, he no longer cared about flaws. The only way to survive was to fight with his life on the line. The blood sword replaced the golden sword and merged with the 5 sword techniques. The power of the 5 elements combined into one, stirring up the winds and clouds. The power that erupted in that instant even forced Mr. Lu to retreat temporarily. Chu Xiu sighed. He had wanted to capture Lionian alive, but judging from Lionian's current state, it was obvious that he was prepared to fight to the death. Therefore, Chu Xiu also grabbed Greed's blade. In that instant, the demonic blade was unsheathed, triggering Greed to devour everything. The sword light of the 5 elements combined was completely devoured by Greed's blade. Even Lionian's protective chi of vigor was completely devoured. There was a loud bang and blood splattered. and Liu Yan's corpse fell to the ground. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with grievances. Chapter 577. And Liu Yan did not die without regret, because he only realized in the end that he had guessed wrong. Previously, he had thought that Chu Xiu was only colluding with the demonic Tao. It was only when Chu Xiu revealed his greed blade that he realized Chu Xiu's true identity. Previously, Chu Xiu had used Lin Ye's identity to heavily injure Su Xing and kill Jianghu. There were many witnesses to these two incidents. The news that Lin Yi had obtained a set of 7 demonic sabers in the minor Fan Tian and possessed astonishing might had also spread. Many people knew about it, and Liu Yan had naturally heard about it. Therefore, it was only at his death's door that he realized that Chu Xiu was Lin Yi, and Lin Yi was Chu Xiu. It turned out that Chu Xiu had never colluded with the demonic Tao. He had been a member of the demonic Tao from the beginning. This was a huge secret, but Liu Yan would never have the chance to reveal it again. Gong Shu Yuan walked over and looked at the hideous blade scars on Liu Yan's corpse. He said with some disdain, "I told you to make the corpse more complete, but you ended up like this." Mr. Lu said unhappily, "This is already not bad. Those Grandmaster puppets that you obtained were almost cut into pieces by you, let alone a single scar." Gong Shu Yuan snorted and did not reply. He just put Liu Yan's corpse away and said to Chu Xiu, "It will take some time to refine the human puppets. I will get someone to inform you when I'm done here." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "We should also go. I met a martial artist from the hidden devil lineage previously. He said that Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode, moon-worshipping cult, Sabodhi Monastery, and other forces had discovered the remains of a branch hall of the 3 Pure Temple. At this time, Longhu Mountain's Zhang Xiling, moon-worshipping cult's Yun Zhongjuan, and the others have already put aside their prejudices and are working together to break the formation. It is estimated that it will take 2 or 3 days to break the formation. We will be in time if we rush over." Chu Xiu's heart stirred. The 3 Pure Temple? After entering the minor Fan Tian, Chu Xiu finally came into contact with some of the secrets of the ancient times, including the magnificent flourishing age of martial arts in the ancient times, which was displayed before Chu Xiu's eyes. Just based on the ruins in Xiaofan Heaven, the martial arts of the ancient times might not be stronger than the current martial arts, and it wasn't as systematic as the current martial arts. However, the advantage of the ancient martial arts was that it was unconstrained, and there were all kinds of strange methods that surpassed your imagination. It was just like Gong Shu Yuan's puppet refining method. If it was in the ancient era, it would be called an innovation. But now, it would be considered an evil method that violated human ethics. Mr. Lu thought that Chu Xiu didn't know about the 3 Pure Temple, so he explained, "The 3 Pure Temple is the leader of the ancient Tao sects, a supreme sect. The 3 Pure Temple is the leader of the 3,000 Tao sections. Even the Celestial Master Mansion, the real martial arts sect, and the Chunyang Tao sect combined are not as powerful as the 3 Pure Temple in the ancient times. The real ruins of the 3 Pure Temple haven't been discovered for so many years, not in the outside world, and not in Xiaofan Heaven. But this time, even if it's just a branch hall, the treasures inside are immeasurable. Otherwise, Taoists, Buddhists, and demons wouldn't be able to unite." Chu Xiu nodded. Mr. Lu looked at Gong Shu Yuan and said, "The 3 Pure Temple is open. Are you going to go?" Gong Shu Yuan scratched his disheveled hair and said, "Forget it, I won't go. That kind of place isn't suitable for me. If I can't get anything and a few puppets are destroyed, it won't be worth it." In fact, Gong Shu Yuan's strength wasn't weak. He came from the Xianwu sect, and he was a genius in puppetry. He was proficient in all kinds of martial arts and formations. However, his fighting strength wasn't too strong because he wasn't good at fighting. For example, if Chu Xiu controlled the Grandmaster level puppet, its power would be completely different from Gong Shu Yuan's. Although Gong Shu Yuan's strength wasn't weak among the warriors of the same level if he used all his skills, he was distressed about his puppets. He didn't want to lose them. A ruin like the 3 Pure Temples branch hall would definitely attract the experts of the Taoists, Buddhists, and demons. This kind of intense situation wasn't suitable for him, so Gong Shu Yuan didn't go. Seeing Gong Shu Yuan say so, Mr. Lu didn't force him. He directly brought Chu Xiu to the Three Pure Temple. However, this time, Chu Xiu didn't use the identity of Lin Yi. Instead, he used his own identity. After appearing in Xiaofan Heaven for so long, Chu Xiu should use his own identity. Moreover, the competition in the Three Pure Temple must be extremely intense. At the moment, the Taoists, Buddhists, and demons had joined forces. However, when they fought, the demons would definitely be the one at a disadvantage. Moreover, he had seriously injured Su Xing and killed Jianghu. He would definitely become a thorn in the eyes of the Taoists and Buddhists. At this time, it was safer to use the identity of Chu Xiu. After parting with Mr. Lu, Chu Xiu headed east. There was no night in Xiaofan Heaven, only daytime. However, there was no sun in the sky. The further east he went, the brighter the light became. After walking for nearly a day, there were waves of power fluctuations in front of him. Chu Xiu walked over to take a look. There were actually 200 to 300 people gathered there. It seemed that more than half of the warriors who entered Xiaofan Heaven had already arrived. And the appearance of the Three Pure Temples branch also appeared in front of Chu Xiu. If Mr. Lu hadn't said that this place was just a branch, Chu Xiu would have thought that this was the real Three Pure Temple. There was no other reason than that this relic was too magnificent. From the outside, the entire branch looked like a huge bronze palace. Apart from the doors and windows, there were no gaps. The most important thing was that this palace was very large. It had a radius of more than 10 miles. It didn't look like a palace at all. It was more like a small city. The bronze walls of the palace were engraved with all kinds of mysterious Tao patterns. Some of them had become a little blurry over time, but they gave people a simple and desolate feeling. And there was also a huge black tortoise cauldron that was 30 feet tall placed at the main entrance of the palace. In the past, when the Three Pure Temple was strong, this place must have been filled with incense and Tao. However, it had become desolate and silent now. At that moment, there were more than 10 martial Tao masters in front of the main entrance of the Three Pure Temple. There were less than half of them that Chu Xiu knew. In the Tao sects, there was the Purple Knight Divine Lord, Zhang Xiling from the Celestial Master Mansion of Mount Longhu and Taoist Guang Ning from the True Martial Arts sect. In the Buddhist sects, there was an eminent monk from the Subodhi Monastery. That eminent monk's name was Jingchan Kongdu. His Dharma name was a little strange. Looking at his appearance, he didn't look like someone from the Central Plains. Instead, he looked like someone from the Western region. In addition to Jingchan Kongdu, there was also a fat monk with big ears and a fat body. He was also breaking the formation. He was not from the two Buddhist sections. Instead, he was an expert from another Buddhist temple. In addition to these two people, Chu Xiu also saw Su Xing in the crowd. At that moment, Su Xing had already healed the injuries caused by greed. However, he did not participate in breaking the formation. Su Xing was the chief of the Dharma Institute. He was not good at things like formations. As for the Devil Path, there were two people participating in breaking the formation. One of them was naturally Yun Zhongjuan. However, there was another person that Chu Xiu had never seen before. That person was a middle-aged man dressed in a black robe with Taotai patterns. He was handsome and had a small mustache. He had an extraordinary aura. Although Chu Xiu had never seen this middle-aged man before, Mr. Lu had previously introduced him to Chu Xiu. This person was also an expert of the Devil Path from the Yinma clan. His name was Miao Yu Chu Wuji. Moreover, this person's background was also extremely legendary. Chu Wuji was from the royal family. However, he was not from the northern Yan, eastern Qi, or western Chu royal family. Instead, he was from the royal family of the Wei Kingdom. It was the Wei Kingdom that was a vassal of the eastern Qi. The northern Yan destroyed the Wei Kingdom. Now, it had become the northern Yan's Wei County, which was also Chu Xiu's hometown. Chu Wuji used to be a prince of the Wei Kingdom. However, his heart was in Jianghu and he had no intention of becoming the emperor. Therefore, his brothers did not see him as a threat. Instead, They tried their best to give him all kinds of resources and help, so that he could live in Jianghu peacefully and not compete with them for the throne. The last emperor of the Wei Kingdom also loved his youngest son the most and gave him everything he wanted. Therefore, the first 20 years of Chu Wuji's life were all in spring. It could be said that everything went smoothly for him. At the age of 20, he stepped into the state of oneness of heaven and men. At his peak, he was ranked 5th on the Longhu list of that generation. He was forthright and generous. He liked to make friends with disciples of famous sects, heroes in Jianghu, and friends from all walks of life. He had a wide network in Jianghu and was praised by many people. Therefore, he was called Young Master Wei Chu Wuji. As a result, the Wei Kingdom was destroyed by the Northern Yan, and the royal family of the Wei Kingdom were all killed. Chu Wuji fell into madness and went to seek help from his old friends, the powerful disciples of famous sects, to avenge him. As a result, some of the disciples of famous sects comforted him, while some of them were hypocritical and perfunctory. Some of them even refused to see him. The killing in Jianghu was related to the fighting in the court, but it also had nothing to do with each other. The two sides were inextricably linked, but the only thing they had in common was that they tried their best to get involved in the affairs of the court when it was not related to their own interests. Based on their friendship with Chu Wuji, it was impossible for them to harm the interests of their sections. Later, Chu Wuji, who had seen through the coldness of the world, found a group of rogue cultivators who were very close to him. Although they were not as powerful as Chu Wuji, some of them were willing to fight with Chu Wuji with their lives. But the result was miserable. These people, who did not even have a Wu Dao Grandmaster, tried to find trouble with the Northern Yan. As a result, they were wiped out by the Northern Yan military. Except for Chu Wuji, who escaped with serious injuries, the others died there. No one knew what Chu Wuji was thinking at that time. But after the incident, Chu Wuji disappeared for more than 10 years. When he reappeared, he was already a Wu Dao Grandmaster of the Yinma clan. He began to slaughter the masters of the Northern Yan military who attacked the Wei Kingdom in order to avenge the Wei Kingdom. In the past, Feng Longquan, the general of the Northern Yan military stationed in Wei County, had one of his arms cut off. It was said in Jianghu that it was Chu Wuji who did it. These were all legends in Jianghu. And according to Mr. Liu, the Yinma clan had a higher evaluation of Chu Wuji. Among the people of this generation, Chu Wuji was one of the most promising grandmasters to enter the real fire spiritual cultivation realm. Of course, the premise was that he could solve the flaw in his state of mind. Chapter 578. It was rare for the Taoist, Buddhist, and demon sects to put aside their prejudices and work together to crack the array calmly. There were also a few other martial Dao grandmasters who were proficient in array formations. This was a rare scene. Along with Chu Xiu's arrival, a wave of discussion resounded in the surroundings. Here comes another one. It's Chu Xiu from the Guanzhong torture room. The top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard are almost all here. I wonder if there will be any changes in the rankings this time. Of course there will be changes. Have you heard that Lin Yi, who is ranked 7th on the Longhu leaderboard, obtained 7 devil sabers in the Xiaofan heaven, severely injured the Dharma Institute's master, Su Xing, and even killed the Chunyang Dao sect's Zhen Yangzi? With the achievement of killing a grandmaster, Lin Yi should be able to enter the top 5 of the Longhu list, right? Don't forget about Li Feilian, who hasn't appeared in the Jianghu for many years. He severely injured Zhen Yangzi with 9 slashes. Without him, Lin Yi wouldn't have been able to kill a martial Dao master like Zhen Yangzi. There are so many experts in lesser mortal sky. Do you think it will threaten little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen's position? He's been number 1 on the Longhu leaderboard for so many years. I'm sure there are many people waiting to take that position. I don't think it's possible. You haven't interacted with the little celestial master before, so you don't know how strong he is. This little celestial master from Longhu Mountain is definitely a dragon among men, much stronger than you can imagine. Zhang Qingzhen is a genius that only appears in Dragon Tiger Mountain in 1,000 years. The supreme figure of the previous generation of Taoism was Immortal Ning Xuanji. Because of this, The true martial arts sect became the supreme figure of Taoism. Now that the Celestial Master Mansion is the leader of Taoism, who knows if the Celestial Master Mansion can cultivate a second Ning Xuanji? I say, Dong Xiangqi, are you crazy? Wasn't it because your jailing Dong family was humiliated by Qinqing Di, and the Celestial Master Abode helped you put in a few good words in front of Qinqing Di? Do you really need to go to the Taoist Master's residence and lick his boots like this? A second Ning Xuanji? Why don't you call him a second LV Chunyang? Bullshit. What kneeling and licking? Could the matters between martial artists be called kneeling and licking? I'm just telling the truth. A bunch of people were arguing non-stop. However, with the arrival of Chu Xiu, the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard were all gathered. Even the top 10 were present. Zhang Qingzhen, who was ranked first, stood behind Zhang Xiling and watched her break the formation attentively. However, according to the rumors in Jianghu, Zhang Qingzhen didn't seem to know how to use formations. Zhong Xian, who was ranked second, was still expressionless. He stood next to Su Xing, his eyes shining brightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Fang Qishao was originally standing with Sword King cities by Qian and Lin Kaiyan. When he saw Chu Xiu, he lazily waved the sword in his hand as a greeting to Chu Xiu. However, he seemed to come to his senses later. Raising his sword in greeting seemed like a provocation, so he put it down and shook his head. His unruly appearance made by Qian's eyebrows twitch. He secretly transmitted a message to Fang Qishao to pay attention to his image, even if he was as expressionless as Zhong Xian. Ying Bailu, who was ranked 5th, stood beside Yan Fian. He maintained a certain distance from her, neither too far nor too close. Not only did he express his admiration, but he also didn't make Yan Fian feel annoyed by him. Although most of the people present were men, even they were convinced by Ying Bailu's infatuation. With the Yu Palace's rules and Yan Fian's identity, it was almost impossible for the two of them to be together. Of course, if it were any other time, there would still be a slight possibility. Yan Fian's aptitude was ordinary, and the Yu Palace had other successors and didn't care about a disciple like her. If the Shangshui Ying clan could pay a sufficient price, the Yu Palace would expel Yan Fian from the sect, and she would naturally be able to marry Ying Bailu. Furthermore, the Yu Palace didn't break their rules. But now, Yan Fian didn't have any thoughts about Ying Bailu. Even if she did, the Yu Palace wouldn't let her go. Chu Xiu also saw Li Failian among these people. He didn't stand with the devil sect, nor did he stand with the righteous sect. Instead, he stood there alone with a blank expression. It was as if there was a vacuum around him, and no one approached him. Previously, Li Failian hadn't appeared for several years. Everyone thought that he was too scared by the Chunyang Dao sect to appear, or that he had died in an accident. In the end, who would have thought that he dared to attack the Chunyang Dao sect's martial Dao Grandmaster, Zhen Yangzi, and severely injured him with 9 strikes? Although Zhen Yangzi was killed by Lin Yi in the end, if it wasn't for Li Failian, Lin Yi's 7 demon saber wouldn't have been able to kill Zhen Yangzi no matter how strong it was. With reference to Su Xing, Zhen Yangzi would at most be severely injured. This person was also a ruthless person. He had endured for many years, and when he attacked, it was a fatal blow. When his flying saber was unsheathed, it would take blood and soul. Even a martial Dao Grandmaster wouldn't dare to say that they could completely block it. Among the warriors of the same level, probably only the top 10 of the Longhu list could block his flying saber. Brother Chu, you're finally here. What's the situation over there? Why are you so slow? Xie Xiao Lu walked over and asked. Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng also followed behind him. After seeing Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian just nodded slightly. He knew the situation, so there was no need to ask too much. Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, I was entangled by something in a relic. There are so many messy things in Xiaofan that it's impossible to guard against. I almost suffered a loss. Xie Xiao Lu nodded, but he didn't suspect anything. After all, there were all kinds of dangers in Xiaofan. Although Chu Xiu was stronger than them, there was nothing he could do if he was unlucky. Chu Xiu pointed at the 3 Pure Temple and said, Have they been breaking the array for the past few days? Xie Xiao Lu said, Of course not. When the three branches of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic meet together, of course they have to fight first before taking action. Although the demonic Tao is at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, the martial Tao grandmasters that came from the demonic Tao are really not weak. Not to mention Yun Zhongjuan of the 9 great divine Magisprius, he is very strong. He once suppressed Chunying Dao sect's Jianghu outside. And that Miao Yu Law Supreme, Chu Wuji, is also very strong. With one slash of the Blood Moon Blade, he almost broke the Dharma Court's head Su Xing's golden body. He fought alone against the Dharma Court's head Su Xing and the great Prajna Temple's abbot, smiling Methra, Qi Jian, and still had the upper hand. That's right, Qi Jian is that fat monk. After fighting for so long, there was no clear winner, so they decided to join forces. Chu Xiu nodded and subconsciously looked at Su Xing. Su Xing's face had been dark before, so Chu Xiu thought he hated him for being injured in the Black Demon Tower. But now, Chu Xiu felt that he was provoked by Chu Wuji's strength. At this time, the other people of Jianghu were also looking around. The top few on the Longhu list had already arrived, but Lin Yi was still missing. Why hadn't he appeared yet? However, some people had already found an excuse for Chu Xiu. In their opinion, Lin Yi was most likely afraid. Since entering the minor mortal world, Lin Yi had shone brilliantly. To be precise, it should be said that he had gone on a killing spree. He had killed the people of Southern Song's Xiahou clan and Gao Ping's Lu clan. The Dharma Court's head Su Xing had been seriously injured by his saber, and Zhen Yangzi of Chunyang Dao sect had also been killed by his saber. It could be said that Lin Yi had offended the 9 great families and the Taoist and Buddhist sects in succession. This was not an ordinary kind of courage. At this time, if Lin Yi dared to appear here, even Yun Zhongjuan and Chu Wuji would not be able to protect him. Moreover, the only person who would protect Lin Yi should be Chu Wuji. Yun Zhongjuan would only protect the moon-worshipping sect's saintess. Why would he care about an outsider from the hidden devil lineage? At this time, Guan Xiu walked over and asked Chu Xiu, "Did you encounter any danger along the way?" Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your concern, Hallmaster. I did encounter some trouble, but I still gained something." Guan Xiu nodded and said with a slight frown, "That's good. By the way, have you seen En Liaonian?" En Liaonian was a martial Dao master, and his speed was naturally much faster than a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. As long as he was not teleported to the most remote place, he would not be able to see a single person. In that case, he should have heard about the discovery of the 3 pristine temples branch hall by now. However, En Liaonian had not appeared. This made Guan Xiu somewhat worried that something had happened to him. In fact, although Guan Xiu and En Liaonian did not see eye to eye, neither of them wanted anything to happen to the other. En Liaonian knew that the Guanzhong torture room's current scale was all thanks to Guan Xiu's planning. Therefore, nothing could happen to Guan Xiu. Guan Xiu also knew that the Guanzhong torture room's status was sensitive. He could not rely on his reputation alone, so he needed someone to support him from below. En Liaonian was the person behind the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, Guan Xiu was a little anxious now that En Liaonian had suddenly disappeared. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I haven't seen the great leader either." Guan Xiu sighed softly. Although he felt that something was amiss, he was not too anxious at the moment. After all, En Liaonian was a martial Dao master. He knew what to do in such a situation. As long as he did not encounter any danger that he could not resist, he should be fine. After thinking about it, Guan Xiu told Chu Xiu, "When the 3 Pristines Hall opens later, just stay at the back with your friends. Don't get involved in the fight for the guru level. Otherwise, even the aftermath of the fight might injure you accidentally." Chu Xiu nodded. However, if Guan Xiu knew that Chu Xiu had killed more than one martial Dao master, he would not think that way. Therefore, although Chu Xiu had agreed to it now, it would still depend on the situation when the 3 Pristines Hall opened. At that moment, a majestic array formation fluctuation attacked in front of the 3 Pristines Hall. Yun Zhongjuan and the others retreated, and the entire ground trembled in an instant. Boundless radiance blossomed from the formation Dao that soared into the 9 heavens. The gate of the bronze palace also slowly opened, emitting ear-piercing creaking noises that revealed a desolate feeling. Endless array formation radiance bloomed and went straight to the 9 levels of heaven. The bronze palace's door also opened slowly and let out an ear-piercing creak, revealing a desolate feeling. Chapter 579. The door of the 3 Pristines Hall opened, but no one moved first. The martial artists at the back naturally didn't dare to move since the martial Dao masters in the front row didn't move. Although everyone knew that although it was dangerous to seize the initiative, the benefits were greater. But in front of a group of martial Dao masters, there were really not many people who dared to seize the initiative. Were they courting death? Yun Zhongjuan and the others looked at each other and slowly walked toward the open door. It was so dark inside that they couldn't perceive anything with their perception. After everyone walked in, the entire bronze hall suddenly became brightly lit. The candlelight suddenly flashed in the bronze lamps, immediately startling everyone. But with the help of the light, everyone could see the scene inside the bronze hall. Compared with the Spirit Treasure Temple or the Black Demon Tower that Chu Xiu had been to before, the branch halls of the 3 Pure Temple were a bit too neat. The surrounding bronze pillars were engraved with Dao patterns, bronze lamps hung, and there were praying mats around. Obviously, people often preached here. At the front of the hall were 3 heavenly venerate statues. However, the strange thing was that the 3 heavenly venerate statues didn't have faces. To be precise, their faces were covered by smoke, so it was impossible to see what they looked like. Just as everyone was sizing up the hall, a voice suddenly rang out. "Welcome, latecomers." Everyone present was suddenly shocked. Even the martial Dao masters stared in the direction of the voice. Even with their strength, they didn't find any vitality in this hall. Who was speaking? Right in front of them, under the 3 statues of the heavenly venerables, spots of brilliance condensed, and a figure wearing a moon-white Taoist robe dotted with star patterns appeared in front of everyone. The figure was a middle-aged Taoist with a long beard, a square face, and a peaceful smile on his face. Just by standing there motionlessly, he gave off a feeling of immortality. But what was strange was that although the Taoist was looking at them, everyone had a feeling that he didn't seem to see them, but a mass of air. Yun Zhongjuan said in a deep voice, "It's not a human." The martial artists behind were a little confused. What else could it be if not a human? Was it a demon or a ghost? Zhang Xiling also nodded and said, "It's indeed not a human. This should be an image imprint left by the 3 Pristine Palaces expert using a formation." Right at this moment, the middle-aged Taoist suddenly said, "You're right, I really am not human." As soon as these words came out, even Yun Zhongjuan was shocked. It was not an image mark, but a living thing? However, the middle-aged Taoist said, "I'm just a projection that was prepared in advance, so I'm not a human. I also don't know if you're humans or not. Since you can see this video of me, it proves that the branch of the 3 Pristines Temple was not damaged in the Great Tribulation, but I also don't know how many years have passed. 100 years? 1,000 years? Or 10,000 years? I don't even know if you're humans, monkeys, or something else. I don't even know if you can understand me. However, since the Hall Master has asked me to leave these things behind, I will speak. My name is Lu Jiao, the 9 of 1, 2, 3, and 4. My original name is not Lu Jiao, but because I like the word 9, I changed my name to Jiao. Nothing in this world is perfect. Jiao is the extreme, but my name is Lu Jiao, and I haven't reached the extreme yet. At this point, Lu Jiao showed a helpless expression and said, "Sorry, I talked too much nonsense. It's time to get down to business." Seeing Lu Jiao's behavior, Chu Xiu and the others subconsciously looked at Fang Qishao. Why is this ancient expert's temper so similar to Fang Qishao's? He's still so talkative on such an occasion. Being stared at by Chu Xiu and the others, Fang Qishao shrugged uncomfortably and said, "Why are you looking at me? Although I talk a lot, I'm much more handsome than this old ox nose." As soon as this remark came out, many Dao sect disciples immediately glared at Fang Qishao. "Who the hell are you calling an ox nose?" Bai Qian glared at Fang Qishao fiercely. "Shut up. Quiet. Don't talk." Feng Qixiao covered his mouth and nodded repeatedly. At this moment, Lu Jiao continued. The Hall Master said that although the great calamity has arrived, there are 50 yen numbers. Out of 49, the one that escapes is a chance of survival. Our Dao sect is also willing to leave behind some things as an inheritance for this chance of survival. Hearing this, everyone's breathing became heavier. They suddenly had a feeling that the Three Pristines Temple, which seemed to be the most difficult, was actually the easiest relic. The formation outside was not an offensive type, but a defensive formation to prevent the Three Pristines Temple from being damaged in the ancient calamity. Therefore, although it was a little difficult to break the formation, there was almost no danger. After entering, there were no traps, no killing formations, and even the inheritance was prepared for you. How could there be so many good things in the world? At this moment, Chu Xiu's feeling was different from the others. He only felt the strength and calmness of the Three Pristines Temple. After entering Xiaofeng Tian, Chu Xiu had seen many relics. In order to resist the great calamity, a top Dao sect like Spirit Treasure Temple was almost completely annihilated, leaving only a seriously injured eldest senior brother and youngest junior brother. The Black Demon Tower also seemed to be a top Demon Dao sect, but they left in a hurry and left behind a lot of things. Although the Blissful Demon Palace was slightly better, it was not much better. Those hungry ghosts were cultivated by the Blissful Demon Palace, but it seemed that they couldn't bring them along in a hurry, so they left them and Yu Xian there. However, the branches of the Three Pristines Temple were neat and tidy. Even the cushions on the ground were placed in a picturesque manner. Lu Jiao still had the mood to joke in the image imprint. He did not have the slightest sense of urgency that everyone had to escape from the great calamity. Moreover, Chu Xiu also remembered that in the diary of the Spirit Treasure Temple's youngest junior brother, it seemed that the Three Pristines Temple had given the Spirit Treasure Temple 2 places to let them leave. Thinking about the current situation, it seemed that the Three Pristines Temple had a way to avoid the great calamity of the ancient times, and they could even let the other Dao sects hide together. Was that why they seemed so calm? Lu Jiao said with a smile on his face, if you also cultivate the martial arts lineage, then you must think that what we left behind is a cultivation method, a secret box, and all kinds of pills and treasures, right? Everyone present was taken aback. What did this mean? Could it be something else? Lu Jiao waved his hand, and the top of the hall became brightly lit. At the same time, 9 strange things were distributed in the top of the hall. It was a transparent ball-shaped object, protected by the formation plate. Within the formation plate, there was the silhouette of an exotic beast roaring and dancing about. Upon closer inspection, there was a seemingly transparent but constantly twisting power in the spherical object. Lu Jiao said, this is the Dao accumulation, which belongs to the Dao lineage. There are a total of 9 Dao accumulation, and each Dao accumulation is different. Things such as cultivation methods and pills are too common. The Dao accumulation is the condensation of the essence of Dao. It contains countless universes. Isn't it much more powerful than cultivation methods? If you comprehend this Dao accumulation, you can even create countless cultivation methods. Of course, the premise is that you can comprehend this Dao accumulation. When he said the last sentence, there was a hint of a smile in Lu Jiao's tone. Except for the martial artists from the Dao lineage, the faces of the others had already darkened. For the martial artists from the Dao lineage, the Dao accumulation was indeed a good thing. As long as they could comprehend it thoroughly, the benefits obtained were indeed stronger than cultivation methods and pills. However, for the martial artists from the Devil Buddha lineage, or those who cultivated the sword principle and other cultivation methods, it was extremely difficult to comprehend the Dao accumulation. At least, it was much more difficult than the martial artists from the Dao lineage. This was not as practical as cultivation methods, pills, or weapons. If it was a pill or a weapon, it could be used directly. Even if it was a cultivation method, it could also be used as a reference. However, the Dao accumulation had to be comprehended to have an effect. Otherwise, it would be a waste. Previously, they thought that the people from the Three Pristine Temple were really kind and took the initiative to leave the good things behind. As a result, They now knew that the three pristine temple was indeed kind, but only to the people from the Tao lineage. Lu Jiu laughed and said, "All right, the things are also given to you. However, I guess that if any of you are not from the Tao lineage, you must be cursing the three pristine temple in your heart. Everyone has their own selfish motives. The things left by the three pristine temple naturally have to be given to the people from the Tao lineage. However, you don't have to be discouraged. There are still some fierce beast souls sealed on the array plate. Swallowing them will be a great supplement and will be very effective for the growth of your mental strength. It is fate that brought us together, so I will also give you something. However, these fierce beast souls are not only supplements, but also used to eliminate those who fish in troubled waters. For those who are not strong enough, retreat for the time being. Otherwise, you will not be swallowed by the fierce beast souls and be swallowed by the souls instead. Everyone, I have finished speaking. Maybe we will meet again if fate allows it." As soon as he finished speaking, the image of Lu Jiu disappeared. Above the main hall, the light of the matrix shone brightly, and the fierce beast's souls directly erupted with terrifying waves of power. They manifested themselves and hid the Taoist connotation in their bodies. Looking at the crowd below, they let out roars. The strength of these souls was already between the martial Tao Grand Master and the unity of heaven and man realm. It could be said that those who were qualified to compete for this thing had to at least have the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm. As for the others, they could only watch the show. The entire hall suddenly fell into silence, but the next moment, countless gangqi erupted. Whether it was the martial Tao Grand Master or the warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm, they all jumped up and rushed towards the 9 souls. Although the Tao accumulation was the most effective for the warriors of the Tao lineage, it was still a treasure. Even if he could not use it, he could not let the people of the Tao lineage get it. Chapter 580. A group of martial Tao Grand Masters fought fiercely in the main hall. The power was so powerful that it seemed to be able to overturn mountains and seas. The branch hall of Three Pristine's temple was protected by a formation, and the place was large enough to accommodate so many martial Tao Grand Masters fighting here. The moment those martial Tao Grand Masters rushed up, Chu Xiu did not choose to fight with them immediately. Those people attacked with all their strength. Although Chu Xiu was qualified to fight with them now, it was limited to one-on-one battles instead of this kind of tangled warfare. The same went for the other young martial artists. They were all waiting to see what would happen. There were only 9 Tao accumulations, but there were more than 20 Wu Dao Grand Masters present. At least more than half of them couldn't get the Tao accumulation. Even if they got it, they would have to fight with the fierce beast souls to get it. Zhang Xiling of the Celestial Master Mansion was one of the strongest martial artists among the Taoist, Buddhist, and demonic lineages. He did not care about the so-called fierce beast souls at all, so he gathered the purple heaven thunderbolt in his palm and slammed it down. The fierce beast souls that looked like flying tigers wailed as they were directly smashed by Zhang Xiling's purple heaven thunderbolt. Moreover, the smashed souls did not dissipate directly. Instead, they turned into fragments and fell to be picked up by other martial artists. These shattered soul essences actually had the same effect of strengthening one's mental energy. This immediately caused many cultivators to fight over them. They could not get the Tao accumulation, but it was better than nothing to get these soul fragments. Just when Zhang Xiling was about to put the Taoist connotation into his bosom, a sonic boom resounded. Zhang Xiling suddenly felt a powerful force pressing down on him. It was as if MT Tai was pressing down on him. Suddenly, the lightning around him shot up to the sky, transforming into a thunder talisman in front of him. A strong force hit him, and the thunder talisman was destroyed in an instant. Zhang Xiling was also blasted away by the punch. The powerful fist intent could destroy all laws. Even the purple heaven thunderbolt could not block it. Zhang Xiling could not help but be furious when he saw who it was. Qingqing Di, what the hell are you doing? You want to comprehend the Tao? You're just like a piece of trash after getting that Taoist connotation. Why are you snatching it? Qingqing Di's martial Tao was like his person, simple and direct to the extreme. Things like Tao enlightenment had nothing to do with Qingqing Di. Qinqing Di snorted and said, "It's useless to me, but my disciple is useful. That disciple of mine has a natural root of wisdom." If he were to comprehend this Tao accumulation, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to become a celestial master or celestial venerable? Looking at Qinqing Di's appearance, Zhang Xiling couldn't help but grit his teeth. He knew that Qinqing Di was here to disgust him. Tao accumulation was of no use to Qinqing Di's lineage. However, Mount Longhu and Qinqing Di had some disagreements. Last time, during the Dong family's opening ceremony, Qinqing Di had humiliated the Dong family in jailing. After that, it was unknown whether it was Qinqing Di's intention, but the World Alliance had annexed a lot of the Dong family's forces and territories. The Dong family had been scared out of their wits by Qinqing Di. At this time, they naturally didn't dare to talk nonsense with Qinqing Di. Therefore, they could only seek help from the Celestial Master Mansion. The Celestial Master Mansion did not lack martial Tao grandmasters, but the mentality and character of each person were different. The person whom the Dong family sought help from was a little arrogant and conceited. He did not take Emperor Qinqing seriously and actually used the power of a disciple of a large sect to oppress Emperor Qinqing. Based on Qinqing Di's character, he didn't want to be enemies with the Celestial Master Mansion. However, the Celestial Master Mansion relied on the fact that they were the leader of the Tao sects to talk nonsense to him. Qinqing Di wasn't so easy to provoke. Fortunately, an elder martial artist of the true fire spirit refinement realm from the Celestial Master Mansion arrived in time. He reprimanded the Grand Master of the Celestial Master Mansion and explained the matter clearly. Only then did the matter was settled. However, it was obvious that Qinqing Di was very upset. He was a person who needed to vent his anger. Now, Zhang Xiling had become his target. Zhang Xiling had dealt with Qinqing Di more than once. He knew that Qinqing Di was such a person. He was also very helpless. This guy was simply a lunatic. He was a lunatic who would fight to the death with anyone when he was crazy. Fortunately, they didn't fight last time. Otherwise, Qinqing Di would really dare to kill someone. Not only did Zhang Xiling sink into depression, but Jingchan Kongdu of the Buddhist Sabodhi Monastery and Qi Jian of the Great Prajna Temple had also gained something. The same was true for Yun Zhongjuan and Chu Wuji of the Devil Dao. Even people like Guan Siyu and Bai Qian of the Sword King City, who didn't belong to the three factions, did not encounter any resistance. With their strength, there weren't many people in the same realm who could compete with them. The only people who were targeted were the people of the Dao sects. Even the people of the Buddhist sects and the Devil Dao were targeting the Dao sects. In the current Jianghu, the strength of the Dao sects was already strong enough. This Dao accumulation was only a reference in the hands of the Buddhist sects. If it fell into the hands of the Devil Dao, it might be of some use. After all, many people in the Devil Dao also cultivated demonic techniques related to the Dao sects. However, if this thing fell into the hands of the Dao sects, it could even greatly improve the strength of the experts in the true fire spirit refinement realm. It could also increase the chances of a martial arts master to advance to the true fire spirit refinement realm. Currently, the distribution of forces in the Jianghu was actually very balanced. Taoism and Buddhism kept each other in check. Under their joint suppression, the Devil Dao was slightly weaker. The remaining 9 big families, 5 big sword sects, or the 4 big divine powers which had deep hatred for each other, the 6 big gangs which were scattered like sand could not pose any threat to the Taoism and Buddhism. However, if the Dao sects obtained these 9 Dao accumulation, the balance would definitely be broken. Therefore, Su Xing of the Great Prajna Temple and Qi Jian of the Great Prajna Temple were basically targeting Taoist Guang Ning of the true martial arts sect. There were only a few martial artists in the Dao sects. In addition, Zhen Yangzi was killed by Chu Xiu, and Zhang Xiling was entangled by Qinqing Di. After fighting for such a long time, the Dao sects didn't even get a single Dao accumulation. This made Taoist Guang Ning constantly curse these people for being shameless. At this moment, in a corner, Yu Qifeng of the White Tiger Hall had gathered his murderous intention and evil spirit to the extreme. After Xiahou Zhen had just used his primordial spirit's secret method to suppress and kill a ferocious beast's soul, the overwhelming white tiger evil spirit shield was like a storm of swords and knives, directly shrouding Xiahou Zhen. Xiahou Zhen snorted coldly. The imperial spirit technique drew the qi of heaven and earth, turning it into a storm to protect his body. However, at that moment, a scarlet bloodlight attacked. Xiahou Zhen suddenly shivered, and his figure immediately moved to the side. However, at this moment, Yu Qifeng's figure emerged from the bloodlight and directly took the formation plate that contained the Dao accumulation in his hand. Yu Qifeng proudly raised his head at Xiahou Zhen and said with a laugh, "Patriarch Xiahou, thank you for helping me get rid of that ferocious beast's soul. That thing was completely manifested by the power of the spirit. If I want to get rid of it, it will take some effort." Xiahou Zhen glared at him. However, before he could counterattack, he saw Zhang Qingzhen's whole body shining with thunder patterns, and he stepped forward. This group of martial arts masters had been fighting for so long. It was time for Zhang Qingzhen, Chu Xiu, and the other outstanding young martial artists to make a move. The first one to stand out was Zhang Qingzhen. The thunder patterns in the white Taoist robe shone, and the thunder light shone on Zhang Qingzhen's handsome face. At this time, Zhang Qingzhen looked like an immortal who had descended to the world. Zhang Qingzhen was aiming at Yu Qifeng. Seeing this scene, Yu Qifeng swallowed his saliva and laughed. "Young celestial master of Dragon Tiger Mountain, I have no enmity with your celestial master mansion. Why don't you go to Buddhism and Taoism to rob things? Why are you staring at the Dao accumulation in my hand?" Yu Qifeng's attitude was a little soft, and he did not want to fight with Zhang Qingzhen. Everyone present could not believe it. Was this still the hot-tempered and murderous Yu Qifeng of White Tiger Hall? In fact, Yu Qifeng had never dealt with Zhang Qingzhen. White Tiger Hall was far away in Eastern Qi, and he rarely dealt with Celestial Master Mansion. However, he did not want to fight with Zhang Qingzhen. It was not because he was afraid or cowardly, but because he had no confidence in his heart. Zhang Qingzhen had dominated the Longhu list for nearly 10 years. It was recognized by the world that his combat power was comparable to that of a martial arts master. Not to mention the one who had died in his hands, more achievements had not been spread. Even now, most people said that Zhang Qingzhen had not been promoted to the realm of martial arts master because he wanted to accumulate or because he was practicing some secret method. If he wanted to be promoted, he could step into the realm of martial arts master at any time. But no matter what, Zhang Qingzhen was a junior. If Yu Qifeng won, it would be dishonorable. If he lost, his reputation would be ruined. Moreover, Yu Qifeng did not have much confidence in winning. However, at this time, Zhang Qingzhen did not answer. He took a step forward and formed a Taoist seal with his hand. The blue lightning around him turned into a roaring thunder dragon and rushed straight toward Yu Qifeng. Seeing that Zhang Qingzhen had made a move, Yu Qifeng gritted his teeth. A ferocious saber that was close to the height of a person appeared in his hand. The incomparably ferocious white tiger divine shield condensed on the body of the saber, gathering boundless killing intent and evil spirit. He slashed down with a loud bang and collided with the thunder dragon. In the blink of an eye, thunderous storms and howls resounded incessantly. The thunder dragon was torn apart, but the blue lightning exploded with a loud bang, directly smashing the 6 revolution precious weapon in Yu Qifeng's hand. He also took a few steps back, his eyes showing a look of horror. He could only describe Zhang Qingzhen's power as terrifying. At this time, the others looked at Zhang Qingzhen as if they had seen a ghost. Previously, they had all heard that Zhang Qingzhen was very strong here and there, but to what extent he was strong, no one knew. But now, they knew that in the face of such a famous martial arts master like Yu Qifeng's weapon was directly shattered in a head-on fight, and he was also blasted away. Other than terrifying, the people present could not think of any other words to describe it. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as terrifying. Yu Qifeng's face was red, not because he was injured, but because he was ashamed. Being blasted away by a junior martial artist with one move, no matter how thick Yu Qifeng's face was, he could not stand it at this time. With a low roar, The white tiger divine shield around Yu Qifeng's body condensed together and turned into a ferocious tiger. With monstrous killing intent, it took the initiative to attack Zhang Qingjin. Chapter 581. The White Tiger Hall's White Tiger Evil God power could be said to be the sharpest among the countless gangqis in Jianghu. Previously, Yu Qifeng had held back a little bit of strength because he was afraid that it would be difficult to explain to Zhang Qingjin if he really killed him, so he held back a little bit of strength. As a result, this time, Yu Qifeng was really angry and directly attacked with all his strength. Yu Jin's white tiger was full of killing intent, and the powerful sharp will rushed into the sky. The whole white tiger seemed to be made up of blades, and its breath was extremely powerful. Zhang Qingjin was still expressionless. Blue thunder gathered around him, and with a wave of one hand, it pressed down. The boundless thunder actually condensed into a fierce tiger, and it rushed straight toward Yu Qifeng. The tiger roared, and the two fierce tigers collided in midair. In an instant, killing intent splashed everywhere, and the power of thunder devoured everything. Yu Jin's white tiger was actually devoured by the thunder at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yu Qifeng's face suddenly changed as he was hit by the power of the thunder, and his figure retreated more than 10 steps back. Zhang Qingjin stepped forward, and his palm fell. The thunder pattern in his palm suddenly lit up, and it was dazzling. The palm fell like a thunderclap, and countless thunder bloomed in his palm, enveloping Yu Qifeng. Everyone present widened their eyes, and there was a look of horror in their eyes. It was said that the junior celestial master Zhang Qingjin had a thunder pattern in his palm, and now it seemed that this was the case. The power of this thunder was not drawn from the power of heaven and earth, but it was completely his own power, but it was already stronger than most martial arts masters. Yu Qifeng roared angrily, and the white tiger evil divine shield, which carried boundless baleful aura, was unleashed to the extreme by him, forcibly resisting the power of this thunder. The killing intent turned into a blood-red blade, about to slash towards Zhang Qingjin. But at this time, Zhang Qingjin fell again, and 5 thunderbolts as thick as buckets smashed down. The 5 thunderbolts pulled each other, and the aura of heaven and earth, with the power of heaven and earth, directly hit Yu Qifeng, causing him to vomit blood. The Dao accumulation formation plate also fell into Zhang Qingjin's hands. 5 thunders execution. Some of the people present could not help but exclaim. Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode's 5 thunders technique was very famous, but in reality, there were not many who could successfully cultivate it. To cultivate the 5 thunders, one had to first cultivate the 5 qis. The power of the 5 thunders belonged to the 5 internal organs of the body. One had to build a very solid foundation in the 5 qis origin realm before one was qualified to cultivate it. Therefore, the starting point of the 5 thunders art was the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm, and the cultivation process was very difficult. Those who could successfully cultivate it were mostly martial Dao grandmasters from Dragon Tiger Mountain. However, when Zhang Qingjin performed it, it was as smooth as flowing water, without any hindrance. Yu Qifeng covered his numb chest, which had been struck by the 5 thunders execution, and his eyes flickered with horror. However, he didn't even say a word and just turned around to leave. Being defeated by a junior martial artist was already shameful enough. What else could he say at this time? Tell Zhang Qingjin to be careful. This matter is not over yet? Did they really think that the celestial master residence on Longhu Mountain was just for show? Zhang Xiling, who was fighting with Qinqing Di, suddenly lit up and shouted, "Qingjin, take the Taoist connotation and leave." Zhang Xiling finally realized that the Buddhist demon lineage definitely didn't want to let the Dao sect lineage have an easy time. It was impossible to get too many Taoist connotations. Therefore, Zhang Qingjin left first and found another opportunity to get another Taoist connotation. As for the people from the true martial arts sect and the other Dao sects, he couldn't care less. However, at this time, Zhang Qingjin didn't leave. Instead, he held the array disc with Taoist connotation and turned his eyes to the crowd. "I know that you want the Taoist connotation very much, but you also don't want me to get it. Some people also think that I've been sitting on the Longhu list for too long. Today, I'll give you this opportunity. Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, Chu Xiu, Ing Bailu, Li Feilian, all of you, come at me together. If you defeat me, the Taoist connotation will be yours. The first place on the Longhu list will also be yours. As soon as these words came out, the crowd suddenly went into an uproar. Everyone looked at Zhang Qingjin in a different way. They even suspected that the person who said these words was a fake Zhang Qingjin. He actually took the initiative to challenge all the young heroes who used to be in the top 5 of the Longhu list. If it was a one-on-one battle, everyone admitted that Zhang Qingjin was indeed strong. However, people like Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, and Chu Xiu weren't weak either. At least, the gap between them was absolutely not to the extent of heaven and earth. But now, Zhang Qingjin actually opened his mouth to challenge these 5 people. It could even be said that he was arrogant, but in fact, Zhang Qingjin wasn't an arrogant person. In the Jianghu, whether it was the older generation of martial artists or the younger generation of martial artists, their impression of Zhang Qingjin was almost the same, and that was that he had a sense of propriety. Zhang Qingjin had always been a person who had a sense of propriety. He was neither arrogant nor rash, nor overly modest. He was a person who conducted himself appropriately and could be said to be perfect. But today, he was arrogant enough to challenge so many outstanding heroes on the Longhu list. What was Zhang Qingjin planning to do? Zhang Xiling couldn't help but shout anxiously, "Qingjin, what are you doing? Don't make trouble at this time. Quickly take the things and leave." Zhang Xiling had watched Zhang Qingjin grow up, so he naturally knew Zhang Qingjin's strength. However, he didn't think that Zhang Qingjin could be strong enough to fight all the outstanding heroes on the Longhu list. All along, Zhang Qingjin had been very calm, but who knew that today, Zhang Qingjin would actually do such an irrational thing? At this time, Zhang Qingjin seemed to not hear Zhang Xiling's words. He just stared unblinkingly at Zhong Xian, Chu Xiu, and the others. Seeing this scene, Zhang Xiling was anxious, but there was no other way. Because he had watched Zhang Qingjin grow up, he also knew Zhang Qingjin's character. Although Zhang Qingjin's character had always been calm and easy to talk to, as long as it was something he had decided, no one could change it, not even the old celestial master. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes at Zhang Qingjin. He could vaguely guess what Zhang Qingjin wanted to do. Even he had to admit that Zhang Qingjin, the number 1 of the younger generation, was really bold. Zhang Qingjin wanted to use the pressure from them to break through and step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm in the most perfect manner. To put it simply, Zhang Qingjin was taking a gamble, a very dangerous gamble. If he won the gamble, Zhang Qingjin would step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, becoming the first person of the younger generation to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. He would always be the number 1 on the Longhu leaderboard because no one could surpass him. However, if he lost the gamble and Zhang Qingjin was defeated, it was hard to say whether he would die or be seriously injured. His state of mind would definitely be affected, and his reputation would also plummet. Little celestial master Zhang Qingjin, who had never been defeated, was defeated because of his arrogance. Even the reputation of the celestial master mansion would be affected to a certain extent. With Zhang Qingjin's strength and his realm, Chu Xiu believed that Zhang Qingjin definitely had 10,000 ways to safely step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and condense the true core. In the end, he chose the most difficult path, a path that was comparable to a gamble. Even Chu Xiu had to admit that Zhang Qingjin was bold, and he was worthy of his current ranking. A divine light flashed in Zhong Xian's eyes. A moment later, the earth energy around him exploded. He took a step forward and said indifferently, "Okay." At this time, Fang Qishao also put away his mischievous look and clenched the long sword in his hand with a solemn expression. "Zhang Qingjin, I've underestimated your courage. In fact, I've never liked you because your performance was too perfect. So perfect that when those old guys in Sword King City scolded me, they used you as a positive example." Bai Qian, who was fighting on the side, had a dark expression on his face. Why did Fang Qishao say everything? In Sword King City, there were indeed many elders who scolded Fang Qishao, telling him to be more serious and learn from Zhang Qingjin's way of dealing with people. However, that was only said in the inner circle. Outside, they wouldn't say that Fang Qishao was inferior to Zhang Qingjin. Wouldn't that make them lose their prestige? But now, Fang Qishao had said it himself. Pointing his sword at Zhang Qingjin, Fang Qishao said in a low voice, "I never expected that you, Zhang Qingjin, would be so willful and so courageous. You want pressure? Fine, I'll give you pressure. 3 years ago, my Karma Sword Dao couldn't defeat your Thunder Sword Dao. Today, let's see if my sword is sharp or not." The seventh young Master Fang had always been very frivolous. Even when he was in a fierce battle, he gave off a frivolous vibe. But now, Fang Qishao stood with his sword in hand, and the sharpness of his sword Dao shot into the sky. A boundless swordsman, test the world. A rare gratified expression appeared on Bai Qian's face. How good would it be if Fang Qishao could always maintain this state? In the future, their Sword King city would surely have another supreme expert with the titles of Sword Saint and Sword God. Unfortunately, with Fang Qishao's character, there were very few people in the world who could make him show such fighting spirit. Holding the heavenly demon dance in his hand, Buddhist light and demonic aura rose from Chu Xiu's body at the same time, soaring into the sky. The might was so powerful that there were even faint demonic howls and Buddhist chants ringing out at the same time. The strength of his foundation caused others to raise their eyebrows. I've long heard of the little celestial master Zhang Qingjin's great name. Now that I've seen you today, you really live up to your reputation. However, we don't have an undeserved reputation either. It could be said that this was the first time Chu Xiu had displayed his strength, and it immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Everyone knew that Chu Xiu cultivated demonic arts, but since he was from the Guanzhong torture room, no one suspected that he was related to the demonic path for the time being. Moreover, Chu Xiu later obtained the inheritance of holy monk Tan Yuan, and his Buddhist martial arts were also very powerful. He cultivated both Buddhism and demonic arts, but it was extremely smooth and natural. The power and momentum of this power were not inferior to that of Fang Qishao, and it was even similar to that of Zhong Xian. In the crowd, Mr. Lu did not make a move to snatch the Taoist connotation. Instead, he moved closer to Chu Wuji and secretly transmitted his voice. "This is the new talent of the Yinma clan. What do you think? Senior Wei Xia likes him very much. After the Xiaofan heaven is over, Senior Wei is going to let Chu Xiu, or Lin Yi, take revenge on the 9th heaven mountain." Chapter 582. The Yinma clan was not monolithic. There were also close and distant relatives. Chu Wuji was one of them, so he already knew Chu Xiu's identity. Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Chu Wuji frowned slightly and said, "Senior Wei actually thinks so highly of Chu Xiu that he's willing to give him such an important mission? Would the other Yinma clan members be willing? After all, this is a good thing to gain prestige. It could even be said to be giving prestige for free. There are many seniors in the Yinma clan. Although their disciples are not as good as Chu Xiu, they are not weak either." Mr. Lu snorted lightly and said, "Those old things are all very cunning. In the past, when my Yinma clan was in the most urgent situation, they were all hiding in the dark like turtles. Now, seeing that my Yinma clan has recovered a little, they want to fight for credit? Dream on. Senior Wei is the last survivor among the 5 sky demons of the 9th heaven mountain. Whoever he wants to send will go. It won't be so easy for others to reap the benefits." Chu Wuji nodded. No matter what, he would definitely stand on Wei Shuya's side. When he was in despair and joined the diabolism, he had received a lot of kindness from Wei Shuya. If the righteous sects were hypocritical, then the diabolism was the cruel reality. Without strength, no one would treat you as one of their own. If Wei Shuya had not helped him several times, Chu Wuji might have been dead by now, and he would not have become a martial Dao grandmaster. At this moment, the whispering between Mr. Lu and Chu Wuji did not attract the attention of the people present. Their attention was on Zhang Qingjin and the others. After Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, and Chu Xiu expressed their stance, Ying Bailu also stood up with a gentle smile on his face and said, "Brother Zhang is very courageous. I'll accompany you." In the end, Li Failian did not say a word, but he held the flying knife in his hand and took a step forward. In terms of temperament, Li Failian was actually the calmest among the people present. No one even knew what he was thinking. However, no matter how indifferent he was, Li Failian was still a young man, and he had his own pride. Even if his ranking wasn't as high as Zhang Qingzhen's, he wouldn't reject Zhang Qingzhen's challenge, regardless of the outcome. Everyone present couldn't help but be excited when they saw this scene. This was a rare event that only happened once in 100 years. Zhang Qingzhen wanted to fight against 5 elites on the dragon and tiger list all by himself. Moreover, none of the 5 people he wanted to challenge were weak. Each of them had the strength to fight him alone. This was an extremely dangerous move. He wanted to use Chu Xiu and the others as whetstones, but it should be known that if he was not careful, he might also become a whetstone for Chu Xiu and the others. After a short period of silence, a wave of energy that caused the hearts of others to palpitate instantly erupted. Zhong Xian and Chu Xiu were the first to attack. Among the people present, no one could compare to Zhong Xian and Chu Xiu when it came to attacking fiercely and explosively. These two could be said to be the 2 people with the strongest attack power. Zhong Xian held the prison-suppressing Akalanatha seal in his hand, and the 4-armed Akalanatha hand formed a seal and smashed it down with a deafening sound. When Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber, demonic aura and sanguine aura condensed together. Its might was ferocious and powerful, but in fact, his saber contained boundless hatred. The saber strike that was filled with hatred was aimed at Zhang Qingzhen's body, as well as his heart. Amidst the whistling wind, Zhang Qingzhen's long hair fluttered, and even a trace of lightning appeared in his eyes. He pressed his hands down, and green lightning condensed in his palms, turning into a dragon and a tiger. Green lightning splashed in all directions, and they rushed toward Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian. The clouds followed the dragon, and the wind followed the tiger. The power of the dragon and tiger gathered wind and clouds, guiding the lightning. With a boundless thunderstorm, it crushed Zhong Xian's prison-suppressing Akalanatha seal and Chu Xiu's knife, and it did not even make the boundless hatred in his knife play a role. However, at this moment, a flying dagger suddenly appeared in front of Zhang Qingzhen. There were so many martial artists present, and even some martial Dao masters did not see when Li Failian used the flying dagger. Through the void, the knife locked onto Zhang Qingzhen's divine soul. At the same time, Fang Qishao's sword was already out of its sheath, and the tip of the sword was pointed directly at Zhang Qingzhen. Regardless of the thunderstorm, it could not stop the seemingly simple but powerful sword. The karma swordsmanship, the sword will hit the target. Fang Qishao and Li Failian were both martial artists who had comprehended the karma swordsmanship. With a knife and a sword to lock the soul, Zhang Qingzhen could not escape. Even if it was Chu Xiu, he would have to use the heavens sun gazing at air skill to the extreme to be able to escape this knife and sword. However, Zhang Qingzhen did not want to escape. Standing in the same place, at the moment when the knife and sword were about to hit him, Zhang Qingzhen's figure turned into purple lightning. His speed was simply too fast, and he had moved a step in an instant. It even gave people an illusion that he was standing there, without moving. He gently pointed a finger, and a faint ray of lightning bloomed. However, it was this faint lightning that led Fang Qishao's sword and Li Failian's knife, causing the two to collide. Li Failian's flying knife was immediately broken, and Fang Qishao also took a step back. Zhang Qingzhen actually relied on his extreme speed to break the karma swordsmanship. However, at this time, Ying Bailu, who had not made a move until now, also made his move. His martial path was not as fierce and violent as Chu Xiu's and Zhong Xian's, nor was it as mystical as Li Failian's and Fang Qishao's. However, his martial path did not have any obvious weakness, and he could adapt to any situation and assume any position. The moment Zhang Qingzhen dodged, Ying Bailu had already made his move. In order to dodge the knife and sword, Zhang Qingzhen's speed was raised to the extreme. In order to break the karma swordsmanship, Zhang Qingzhen's attention was also raised to the extreme. Therefore, Ying Bailu did not make a move. He was waiting for Zhang Qingzhen's state to change. As long as Zhang Qingjun relaxed a little, it would be his turn to make a move. And now, that opportunity had arrived. The ink-colored astral energy turned into a black dragon and condensed into a knife, with the dragon's head as the handle, the dragon's body as the tip, and the dragon's tail as the blade. Great Dragon Saber. The saber slashed down, accompanied by a dragon's roar. The saber intent was extremely sharp, and it just happened to seize the slight gap when Zhang Qingjun relaxed. Zhang Qingjun did not turn his head, and it was too late for him to do so. However, lightning condensed around his body, turning into a lightning talisman that shielded behind him. Lightning exploded, and the black dragon dissipated, but Zhang Qingjun was also blasted back more than 10 steps. In the first exchange, Zhang Qingjun had fallen into a disadvantageous position. However, in the crowd's view, it was normal for Zhang Qingjun to fall into a disadvantageous position. It would be strange if he could gain the upper hand. First, he displayed his terrifying strength with the Wind Cloud Dragon Tiger Lightning Force, blocking Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian, who had the fiercest physical strength. After that, he focused all of his attention and spiritual power to the extreme, and combined that with his lightning-like speed, he broke through Li Failian and the 7th young master Fang's Tao of Karma. At this time, he seemed to be relaxed, but in reality he didn't have any extra strength left. That was why he was forced back by Ying Bailu, who attacked last. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu and the others attacked again, but this time, it was Fang Qishao who made the first move. Sharp sword light sprinkled down. Fang Qishao's sword seemed to have a mind of its own, sealing all of Zhang Qingjun's escape routes. As long as Zhang Qingjun made the slightest movement, the sword light would change, neither attacking nor defending, only trapping Fang Qishao. Although Fang Qishao was alone, the effect was similar to a sword formation. Zhang Qingjun said indifferently, "The Sword King City's siege sword formation? It's useless against me." Fang Qishao raised his eyebrows and said, "Good eyesight, but whether it's useful against you or not, we'll see later." Zhang Qingjun's figure moved, lightning flashing around him, but before he could break the formation, Zhong Xian's body was already shining with dazzling Buddhist light, crushing over. Behind him, the pharmacist glazed light King Dharma idol protected him, and when the seal fell, it was like a landslide. Zhang Qingjun blasted out the 5 Thunder Execution Technique in his hand. Although the power of the 5 Thunder Execution Technique was extremely strong and even seriously injured Yu Qifeng just now, in the face of Zhong Xian, whose physical cultivation was abnormally strong, even the 5 Thunder Execution Technique could not hurt Zhong Xian. It only made the Buddha's light around him dim a little. At the same time, Chu Xiu's body bloomed with Buddhist light, and the shadow of Mahavarokana appeared behind him. His palm fell, changing the sun to steal the heavens. Under the sun-changing technique, the power of the palm directly enveloped Zhang Qingjun, forcing Zhang Qingjun to shine with lightning, and layers of thunder talismans overlapped, but they exploded one after another. In the past, when Chu Xiu's strength was not as good as Zhong Xian's, he used the sun-changing technique to fight Zhong Xian head-on. At this time, Chu Xiu's strength was not what it used to be, and the power of the sun-changing technique was naturally not the same. Fang Qishao's siege sword formation was around, and Zhong Xian was also in front of him. Zhang Qingjun could not move in a large range and could only use thunder talismans to resist, but the powerful power of the sun-changing technique had already blasted Zhang Qingjun 3 feet into the ground. Ying Bailu was not idle either. The black gang qi around him evolved into the black dragon spear, and the spear momentum was big and wide. Together with Zhong Xian, who attacked fiercely, it was almost invulnerable. Ying Bailu's martial arts were like this, ever-changing, hard, and soft. No matter who he cooperated with, he could exert the greatest effect. And the most terrifying one was Li Failian. He only had 10 flying knives, and the first knife was to test Zhang Qingjun's strength. He had already tested Li Failian's strength, and with Li Failian's character, he would either not use his knife, or when he did, it would be a fatal blow. Chu Xiu and the other 4 had never cooperated before. On the contrary, there were more or less some grudges between them, or they were just passers-by. But now, in the second round, they already had a tacit understanding. In the first attack, Both sides were testing each other, including Chu Xiu and the others, to test each other's strength. And when the second attack came, they found their own positions, the most suitable positions for themselves. Fang Qishao was in charge of intercepting, Zhong Xian, who had a strong body, was in charge of resisting, Ying Bailu was in charge of supporting Zhong Xian, making up for the flaws in his wild fighting style, Chu Xiu was in charge of attacking head-on, and Li Failian was always waiting for a flaw for a fatal blow. Chapter 583. In such a short time, Zhang Qingjun was forced into a desperate situation. Everyone present could not help but shake their heads. Zhang Qingjun was still a little too impulsive. None of those ranked in the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard were weaklings. Zhang Qingjun might be able to defeat them one-on-one, but it would be impossible for him to win so easily. However, he had to fight against 5 of them alone. His chances of winning were pitifully low. At this moment, Zhang Qingjun was besieged by 4 people and had Li Failian glaring at him from the outside. However, his expression did not change at all. In fact, he had expected this scene from the beginning. Zhang Qingjun had never underestimated anyone. If Zhong Xian, Chu Xiu, and the others were trash, he would not have challenged the 5 of them. In that desperate situation, Zhang Qingjun's eyes switched between yin and yang. The unyielding yang qi and the cold yin qi burst out and condensed in the lightning. Lightning was born from the yin and yang qi. Lightning was yang, and lightning was yin. The Celestial Master Mansion cultivated the thunder method, but the Celestial Master Mansion was an orthodox Taoist sect. They cultivated the thunder method, but at the end of the day, they actually cultivated the way of yin and yang in the world. The thunder method was just a kind of power that evolved from the power of yin and yang. In an instant, 2 bolts of lightning, several feet thick, flowed around Zhang Qingjun. One of them was as hot as fire, and the other was as black as ink, like mud. Yang lightning and yin lightning. The 2 forces combined and continuously spiraled and exploded. They tore apart Fang Qishao's siege sword formation, forced Zhong Xian and Ying Bailu back, and forcibly resisted Chu Xiu's great sun-changing technique. Finally, they completely destroyed the Vairocana shadow behind him. Li Failian held the flying knife in his hand and focused his mind to the extreme. However, he still did not use the knife in the end because he was not confident. When the 2 bolts of lightning dissipated, Zhang Qingjun's face was slightly pale. Obviously, he was under great pressure to control this kind of power. At this time, Zhang Xiling was no longer in the mood to fight for the Taoist connotation. All his attention was on Zhang Qingjun. Zhang Qingjun was the future hope of the Celestial Master Abode. Nothing must happen to him. At this moment, looking at Zhang Qingjun's appearance, Zhang Xiling couldn't help but mutter anxiously, "He was too impulsive. I was too impulsive." The yin-yang infinite thunder that Zhang Qingjun used just now was the secret method of the Celestial Master Mansion, which used the power of yin and yang to trigger the origin of thunder. Even the martial Dao Grand Masters of the Celestial Master Mansion did not dare to say that they could completely control the power of heaven and earth. Now that Zhang Qingjun used these secret methods, it was obvious that he was also under great pressure. In fact, in the Celestial Master Abode, ordinary disciples would not be able to come into contact with so many cultivation methods and secret techniques. You would have to wait until you were strong enough, or until a master agreed to teach you. Only then would you be able to learn those cultivation methods and secret techniques. However, these rules were useless to Zhang Qingjun. Those cultivation methods and secret techniques in the Celestial Master Abode could be read by Zhang Qingjun at will. After all, his status and strength were there. However, Zhang Xiling now regretted it. If he had known this would happen, he would not have let Zhang Qingjun learn so many secret techniques that he could not control. Everyone thought that Zhang Qingjun had a sense of propriety, but once he was willful, no one could stop him. Lightning flashed, and Zhang Qingjun made a Taoist seal with his hand. The Gang Qi around him burned fiercely, and a divine shadow condensed behind him. The Taoist connotation was ethereal, but it was surrounded by thunder. Anyone who understood the Tao lineage would be able to recognize that the divine figure was the heavenly lord of the nine heavens responding thunder that the Tao lineage worshipped. The heavenly lord divine shadow made a Taoist seal with his hand, and with a wave of his hand, powerful thunder of 5 thunder execution, heavenly thunder of purple heaven, heavenly thunder of heaven, and other different attributes of thunder fell and took the initiative to attack Chu Xiu and the others. However, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. What was Zhang Qingzhen trying to do? Did he really want to force himself into a desperate situation? Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique had the power to steal the fortune of heaven and earth and change the sun. It absorbed the power of Vairocana into one's own body, and the requirement for strength foundation was not ordinary. The human body could not withstand this power, and when used, the qi and blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling and burning because of this power. Now that Zhang Qingzhen's secret technique was similar to Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique, it also contained the power of the Heavenly Lord of the Nine Heavens responding thunder and Heavenly Lord of the Nine Heavens. However, the consumption was not ordinary. His gang qi was consumed like flowing water. Not to mention that Zhang Qingzhen was not a martial Dao Grandmaster yet. Even if he had become a martial Dao Grandmaster, the martial Dao true core could not absorb so much qi of heaven and earth to consume. However, since Zhang Qingzhen had already made a move, Chu Xiu and the others naturally would not dodge and attack together. Even Li Failian had already slashed out his 3 flying daggers. The sky was filled with thunder and lightning, and the deafening roar of gang qi sounded. Being in the thunder and lightning, Chu Xiu also exerted his strength foundation to the extreme for the first time. Moreover, this was not the kind of battle with martial Dao Grandmasters, but a fight between people of the same level. Everyone was in the oneness of heaven and man realm, but each of them exerted the power of this realm to the extreme. It could be said that the few of them were almost at the peak of the entire young generation in the underworld. Zhang Qingzhen fought against 5 alone. He wanted to use the pressure of Chu Xiu and the others as a sharpening stone, so that his strength could reach perfection and step into the martial Dao Grand Master realm. But in reality, in the battle, Chu Xiu and the others were not sharpening stones. Each of them was an extremely sharp blade. In the battle, they would either sharpen their opponent's blade, or both sides would suffer heavy losses. At this stage of the battle, the few of them had actually used their full strength, except for the secret technique of burning their blood essence. However, even though Zhang Qingzhen had used this level of secret technique, he still could not withstand the joint attack of Chu Xiu and the others. In less than 100 breaths, the aura around Zhang Qingzhen had gradually weakened. The divine image of the Divine Lord of Universal Thunder behind him had also gradually dimmed. Fang Qishao's sword turned into thousands of swords, and each sword strike blocked Zhang Qingzhen's chance to dodge. Zhong Xian, on the other hand, held the great virtue Akalanatha seal in his hand, which had the power to shake mountains. Ying Bailu's body was surrounded by black energy, which turned into a black dragon that circled around him. Every time his fist landed, the black dragon would roar and roar. Chu Xiu also used his full strength. He performed the colorless sealing palm imprint, and the life and death in his palm could overturn heaven and earth. This was the strongest martial technique created by Master Tam Yuan in the past. When its power was unleashed to the extreme, it was even more powerful than the great sun-shifting technique. Li Failian, who was at the back, had also unleashed 5 saber strikes at the same time. Apart from the saber strike that he had used to put his life on the line, this was already his full strength. Sensing the energy wave, even the martial Dao Grandmasters present had a slight change of expression. Even a martial Dao Grandmaster would not be able to withstand a pincer attack from the 5 of them. If it was Zhang Qingzhen, he would most likely be dead as well. However, at this moment, thousands of lightning bolts suddenly bloomed in Zhang Qingzhen's eyes. The Universal Heavenly Lord's divine shadow behind him completely shattered, but it did not dissipate. Instead, it condensed into his body. As Zhang Qingzhen absorbed the divine shadow, the sky full of thunderstorms suddenly fell and shrouded Zhang Qingzhen. At the same time, the thunderstorms also completely destroyed the attacks of Chu Xiu and the others. The thunderstorms were evolved from the power of heaven and earth. No matter how strong a human was, they could not resist the power of heaven and earth. However, in the thunderstorms, Zhang Qingjun was unscathed. His aura was even rising bit by bit. As his aura rose to the extreme, it was as if something had shattered, and a powerful aura immediately spread across the entire place. With a wave of his hand, the boundless thunderstorms around Zhang Qingjun began to shrink completely. In the end, they turned into the size of a pill and were swallowed by Zhang Qingjun. In an instant, the thunderstorms surged like a thunderstorm. Thunderclap golden pill. Zhang Xiling looked at Zhang Qingjun with a face of ecstasy and disbelief. Zhang Xiling was not too excited that Zhang Qingjun had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Not to mention the Celestial Master abode, everyone in the underworld knew that Zhang Qingjun had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. What he was really excited about was that Zhang Qingjun had condensed the Thunderclap golden pill that no one in the Celestial Master abode had condensed for thousands of years. The martial Dao True Pellet realm was the most important realm for martial artists. At the same time, the three lineages of Taoism, Buddhism, and Demon had extremely detailed analysis of this realm. Drawing the power of heaven and earth to refine the martial Dao True Pellet in the Dantian and communicate with the power of heaven and earth. Buddhism called it the Saraira, while Taoism called it the Golden Pill. When a golden pill was swallowed into the abdomen, one would know that one's fate was not up to the heavens. The so-called golden pill in Taoism was the meaning of the martial Dao True Pellet. The martial Dao True Pellet marked that a martial artist could officially connect with heaven and earth, step into a mysterious realm, and integrate with heaven and earth. The changes were different for each sect and even for each person. For example, the lineage of the Celestial Master abode had cultivated thunder to the extreme and stepped into the Grandmaster realm. What they condensed was the Thunderclap golden pill. When they breathed, there would be the sound of thunder, and in an instant, they could transform the chi of heaven and earth into the power of thunder. However, the Thunderclap golden pill was extremely difficult to cultivate. At least in the past 1,000 years, no one in the Celestial Master abode had successfully cultivated it. Zhang Qingjun was the first. It was no wonder that after such a long time, Zhang Qingjun could condense the martial Dao True Pellet and step into the Grandmaster realm, but he had been accumulating it. It turned out that he had a big plan. He was actually preparing to condense the Thunderclap golden pill that no one in the Celestial Master abode had refined for thousands of years. Shrouded in the boundless thunder, Zhang Qingjun took out the array disc containing the Taoist connotation from the secret space box and threw it into the air. Under the blessing of the array, it floated above the hall. Looking at Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian, and the others, Zhang Qingjun said in a deep voice, "I've lost the bet. I've lost, and the Taoist connotation is yours." After that, Zhang Qingjun turned around and left. He didn't even help Zhang Xiling to continue fighting for the other Taoist connotation. Everyone on the scene was stunned. But then everyone realized that Zhang Qingjun had a point when he said that he had lost. Fighting 1 against 5, Zhang Qingjun was almost bound to lose. If Zhang Qingjun hadn't stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm in the last blow, he might have been seriously injured. But at the same time, although Zhang Qingjun lost, he also won because he had achieved his goal. He had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and condensed the Thunderclap True Pellet. Anyway, no matter what, Zhang Qingjun didn't lose. Chapter 584. Zhang Qingjun stepped into the Grand Master realm and left calmly, but it almost drove Zhang Xiling crazy. "You admit that you lost, so be it. Why did you throw out the Dao accumulation?" Since Zhang Qingjun has now become a Grand Master, even if he wants to leave with the Dao accumulation, others can't stop him. Also, forget about throwing out the Dao accumulation in your hand. Why do you still want to leave? Did you forget that you still have a Master's Junior who is fighting here? Seeing Zhang Xiling's expression, Emperor Qinqingdi sneered and said, "There are a lot of people fishing for fame in your Celestial Master Mansion, but this Junior Zhang Qingjun is not bad. He means what he says. Since he admitted that he lost, he will naturally hand over the Taoist connotation. I like this character. As for why he left, Zhang Xiling, are you stupid? You just stepped into the real pellet state, and your unstable and restless real pellet fought with others. Are you going to cripple this kid? Hearing Chen Qingdi's words, Zhang Xiling reacted. He just stepped into the real pellet state. Because the real pellet had just been condensed, it was not very compatible with his body, so he must first cultivate for a while to stabilize the real pellet. Zhang Qingzhen had just stepped into this realm, so it was naturally impossible to stay here and fight with others unless he didn't want his foundation. However, Zhang Xiling also glanced at Chen Qingdi in surprise. He actually came to remind me? Chen Qingdi said faintly, I've vented my anger by beating you up. The grievances between me and your Taoist master mansion are over, but if there are any cats and dogs barking in front of me, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Chen Qingdi knew the power of the Taoist master mansion. Although he was not afraid of the Taoist master mansion, he was not crazy enough to fight with the Taoist master mansion to the end just because of some quarrel. If he really wanted to fight to the death, he would have killed the real fire spirit refinement state powerhouse of the Taoist master mansion in the past. Even though the other party had a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, in the eyes of Chen Qingdi, an old true fire spirit refinement realm expert could not stop him. Zhang Xiling furrowed her brows as she watched Emperor Chen Qingdi leave. The incident in Chen Qingdi was an undeserved disaster for him. After all, he wasn't the one who did it. However, through this incident, Zhang Xiling also saw some of the shortcomings of Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode. It was time to talk to the old celestial master to restrain the disciples of celestial master abode. It was inevitable for the disciples of large sects to be arrogant, but the Tao sect advocated purity and inaction. If one's state of mind was filled with obsession, it would not only affect one's own cultivation, but it would also affect the future development of the sect. Just look at the current Chunyang Tao sect. Its obsession was too deep, and its actions were too extreme. The celestial master abode was not like this in the past, but as the Chunyang Tao sect weakened and the true martial sect kept a low profile after Ning Xuanji's disappearance, some people in the celestial master abode really regarded themselves as the leader of the Tao sect and the supreme of the martial arts world. Such a mentality could not be tolerated. Otherwise, it would be like the incident in Chen Qingdi where they offended a powerhouse for no reason. Unfortunately, the brain sometimes had nothing to do with martial arts cultivation. Even though some people had cultivated to the Grandmaster realm, their brains were still a little useless and could not see through these things. At this time, in the field, Chu Xiu and the others were standing on the spot, motionless. Zhang Qingzhen was the #1 person of their generation. He had been at the top of the Longhu list for nearly 10 years and no one could surpass him. Now that he had stepped into the martial Tao Grandmaster realm, he was automatically excluded from the list. Therefore, although this position was given up, it could be said that Zhang Qingzhen had defended this position himself. Therefore, everyone present felt a little complicated. Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen had been fighting for more than 10 years. The two of them, one Taoist and one Buddhist, had fought countless times. Most of the time, Zhang Qingzhen was slightly superior. However, because it was not a battle of life and death, no one knew who would emerge victorious. But now, Zhang Qingzhen was one step ahead of him. This made Zhong Xian, who had always been calm, feel a little upset. On the other hand, Fang Qishao's expression was a little ugly. Of course, given his character, it was not because he was jealous that Zhang Qingzhen had stepped into the martial Tao Grandmaster realm, but from today onward, he would probably be scolded by the old guys in Sword King City again. His willfulness would cause trouble, but Zhang Qingzhen's willfulness would cause him to condense the Thunder Golden Core and step into the martial Tao Grandmaster realm. The gap was too big. For a long time to come, Zhang Qingzhen would still be regarded as his positive example. Everyone looked up at the Tao accumulation that Zhang Qingzhen had dropped in the air. Chu Xiu was the first to attack. The heavenly demon dance in his hand was filled with hatred, and he slashed at Zhong Xian with boundless blood devil qi. Just now, Zhang Qingzhen used them as whetstones to bear the pressure in order to make a breakthrough. However, Chu Xiu and the others had also accumulated the foundation of the oneness of heaven and man realm in that battle. In fact, Chu Xiu even thought that the battle was too short. If it was a little longer, although Chu Xiu could not break through to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm in the battle like Zhang Qingjin, he could at least push the accumulation of the oneness of heaven and man realm to the peak. Therefore, although Zhang Qingjin had left, the others were still there. Zhong Xian was a very good opponent. Last time, at Master Tam Yuan's place, Chu Xiu fought with Zhong Xian. Although that battle seemed to be a draw and they were evenly matched, Chu Xiu knew that he had lost. He had tried his best to fight Zhong Xian to a draw, but Zhong Xian still had strength to spare. If it wasn't for Master Tam Yuan's appearance in the end, Chu Xiu would definitely be the loser. Now, Chu Xiu's cultivation had improved further. He was ready to see who was stronger between him and Zhong Xian. Zhong Xian's eyes glowed as he held the bright king seal in his hand to meet Chu Xiu's saber. However, at the next moment, Chu Xiu could sense a clear battle intent from him. It was obvious that Zhong Xian was thinking the same thing as Chu Xiu. Seeing that Chu Xiu had already started fighting with Zhong Xian, a smile appeared on Ying Bailu's face. "Brother Fong, why don't we spar again?" Fong Qishao pursed his lips and said, "Fighting with you is the most boring. Ying Bailu, the Ying family always likes to hide things. Can't you show your true strength? If you had used your full strength just now, perhaps Zhang Qingjin wouldn't have been able to become a martial Dao Grandmaster. I'm afraid he would have lost." Ying Bailu shook his head and said, "Some things can't be revealed. Once they are revealed, it will be a hopeless situation. Besides, I didn't hold back just now. No one will hold back against the little celestial master, Zhang Qingjin. Brother Fong, please enlighten me." As soon as he finished speaking, Ying Bailu did not ask if Fong Qishao agreed or not. Black Qi burst out from his body and condensed into the shape of a black dragon. With an earth-shattering roar, it charged at Fong Qishao. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw that. What's going on with them? They were fighting against Zhang Qingjin just now, but now they're fighting on their own. I don't understand. I really don't understand. However, some of the older martial Dao masters nodded. There were many geniuses on the Longhu leaderboard in this generation. Although the little celestial master, Zhang Qingjin, was talented, he could not overshadow the glory of the others. To put it bluntly, the most important thing in the martial Dao lineage was strength. Otherwise, no matter how amazing one's schemes were, they would not be able to withstand a punch that could crush all schemes. Nie Donglu from the morgue of the Longhu leaderboard was also someone like that. However, he was too calculative and neglected his own strength. In the end, he died a violent death. There were many smart people like that in the Jianghu, but unfortunately, there were only a few who could make it to the end. How many of the strongest people who stood at the peak of the Jianghu did not make it to their current position by scheming and scheming? Right now, Chu Xiu and the others did not care about their opponent's background, past grudges, or victory or defeat. They only wanted to hone their strength and fight with all their might in such an occasion where they could gather. That was the right way to go. Of course, for them, this battle was to find a suitable opponent to hone their strength. However, for the people outside, this was also a major reshuffle on the Longhu leaderboard. With Zhang Qingjin gone, who would be the next first on the Longhu leaderboard? Under normal circumstances, it should be Zhong Xian. However, there were too many variables now, and the biggest one was Chu Xiu. When they fought with Zhang Qingjin earlier, everyone could already tell that apart from Li Failian, who was always looking for opportunities, the only ones who could pose a fatal threat to Zhang Qingjin were Chu Xiu, who attacked fiercely and had extremely explosive power. No one had expected Chu Xiu's improvement to be so great. His accumulation of power had already reached a rather shocking level. Even some of the martial Dao masters present were not confident that they could withstand Chu Xiu's sun-changing skill and colorless sealing palm without any pressure. Therefore, after this battle, there would definitely be a major reshuffle on the Longhu leaderboard. Who would ascend to the top would depend on this battle. Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian, Fong Qishao, and Ying Bailu fought separately. However, Li Failian just stood at the side and watched for a while before he directly retreated and stood at the back to watch the battle from a safe distance. It was not that he did not want to fight, but Li Failian had already attacked 9 times. The last attack was to risk his life. Now, he could only recover his strength and watch the battle from the side. Everyone present was an expert, so they could naturally see Li Failian's strength. Although Li Failian had indeed posed a great threat to Zhang Qingjin earlier, his fighting style was still incomparable to Chu Xiu's. He only had the strength to attack 10 times. If he could not kill his opponent with the first 9 attacks, he would risk his life with the 10th attack. In terms of real combat power, there was no doubt that Chu Xiu was above Li Failian. As for the Taoist connotation floating above the 4 of them, no one dared to snatch it. They just let it float there. This thing did not belong to a single person, but it was the trophy of Chu Xiu and the other 4. If anyone dared to take it at this time, the consequences would be very miserable, so no one wanted to try. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.